Chapter 2021 Searching for Firm Essence Green Gold. Chapter 2021 Searching for Firm Essence Green Gold. Ling Han didn't know how the people on the island had triggered the beast tide. However, since they could trigger it, they could naturally cause it to continue. This didn't worry Ling Han. Right now, he was simply concerned with how to obtain that source power of heaven and earth. The battle continued, and the sea creatures continued to surge forth. They had complete disregard for their own life and death, and they simply yearned to break through the defenses. 10 days, 15 days. On the 17th day, Ling Han suddenly felt the pressure easing. The beast tide is weakening. There are no new sea creatures charging over. It's finally about to end. We've finally held them back. Everyone faltered for a moment before feeling a rush of delight. Even though they were exhausted, it was a miracle that not a single one of them had been killed during the intense battle. "We're being protected by a deity," someone immediately said with a devout expression. Their words resonated with everyone else, and they all nodded in agreement. After annihilating the final wave of the beast tide, they all kneeled down to pray toward the ancient castle. Qin Wei and the others exchanged a glance. Even though they hadn't enjoyed a buff from the deity, it was true that not a single one of them had died during the battle. As such, how could they not regard this as a miracle? Several of them immediately kneeled down in prayer. Meanwhile, several of them remained standing. They hadn't obtained any benefits, and they had instead fought a battle for the sake of others first. That being the case, they naturally couldn't bring themselves to kneel down. Ling Han silently stepped back. The retreat of the beast tide also signified that the sacrificial offering was nearing its end. It was time to collect that source power of heaven and earth. Small Tower, lead the way. He arrived behind a huge boulder, where he directly broke through the ground and tunneled into the earth. The firm essence green gold was buried deep beneath the ground. If Ling Han had practiced the regulations of earth, he wouldn't have needed to tunnel through the earth in such a crude manner. By channeling the Tao of Earth, tunneling through the ground would have been like soaring through the sky. Now, however, he had no choice but to use this crude method to forge a path. Fortunately, his physique was tough enough, and his power was also strong enough. As he tunneled down, the stone and earth before him were much like water. They would affect his speed, but not to a significant degree. Small Tower pointed out the correct path, and Ling Han followed its guidance. After descending thousands of meters underground, he finally started to feel some resistance. The earth had become firmer, and it was incredibly hard and tough. Rather than being composed of dirt and stone, it was as if it had been forged from divine metal. A thought occurred to Ling Han. By the looks of it, he was most likely nearing the firm essence green gold. Under the influence of this source power of heaven and earth, even the surrounding terrain had become as stiff as metal. Then under the influence of the firm essence green gold, might this dirt have transformed into genuine metal, or even godly metal? Ling Han immediately drew his divine demon sword. First of all, he wanted to see whether his divine demon sword could absorb the metallic element contained within the earth. Second of all, wielding the divine demon sword would allow him to travel at a quicker speed. In terms of destructive ability alone, the divine demon sword was superior to him. With this hope in his mind, the divine demon sword immediately thrust forward. Wong, the pseudo-celestial sword, shuddered slightly. At the same time, the surrounding earth started to dazzle, glowing at times and dimming at others. It was as if the earth were breathing. My speculation was right. Ling Han faltered upon seeing this. He was then overcome with delight. The earth in this region had all transformed into godly metal. Moreover, it might have even reached the level of pseudo-divine metal. It was because of this that he found it increasingly difficult to advance. To the divine demon sword, however, this was a delectable feast. This is incredible. Ling Han wielded his sword and continued forward, allowing it to absorb the godly metal to its heart's content. In fact, he was advancing at an even slower speed than before. Even though the divine demon sword had a huge appetite, it still needed time to digest what it had absorbed. However, Ling Han wasn't impatient at all. After all, this kind of opportunity was far too rare. The formation of a source power of heaven and earth would require heaven knew how many hundreds of millions of years. In fact, it might even take several epochs. During the process of its formation, it would naturally affect the surrounding environment as well. Thus, transforming the surrounding earth into godly metal was, in fact, very understandable and normal. Anyhow, Ling Han had come across it, and he had truly struck gold. After descending a further few thousand meters, Ling Han started to feel an aura of violence and murder. In fact, this wasn't simply a feeling. Rather, he could also see it with his eyes. After breaking through the stone and earth, he could see streaks of air currents flowing through the surroundings. They were like swords and sabers, and even Ling Han's physique wasn't tough enough to withstand their power. They could easily breach his physique and draw blood. This was the violent aura of the Tao of metal. It was brimming with devastating destructive power. Ling Han tried to carefully avoid these air currents, yet this was an incredibly difficult task. The streaks of air currents had no pattern to their movements, and they continued to cut through the surroundings in a chaotic and unpredictable fashion. Moreover, their speed was incredible, and they could breach Ling Han's defenses before he even noticed their approach. At some point in time, Ling Han raised his divine demon sword to parry their attacks. To his surprise, he discovered that the divine demon sword could even absorb this kind of murderous aura. He came to a sudden realization. The divine demon sword wasn't absorbing metal itself, and it was instead absorbing the regulations of metal. It was because of this that metal would be reduced to smithereens after being engulfed by it. Since this murderous aura also contained the regulation of metal, it could naturally be absorbed by the divine demon sword as well. Interesting. A smile spread across Ling Han's face as he advanced with sword in hand. He cut aside all obstacles, and he advanced with no trouble at all. After an hour or so, the divine demon sword suddenly stopped absorbing the surrounding regulations of metal. Its blade started to quiver slightly, and several symbols of the great Tao started to materialize around it. However, they immediately shattered again, only to be replaced by new symbols of the great Tao. These symbols were far more complex, and they were also far more complete. It was advancing. 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. If a cultivator wanted to advance, they would need to make countless preparations. Moreover, they would also need to face heavenly tribulation and whatnot. However, the divine demon sword had advanced in an instant. This was because there was only a single level above that of godly metal to the divine demon sword. It was divine metal. The notion of 1-star pseudo-divine metal, 2-star pseudo-divine metal, and so on were all divisions created by humans. In reality, nature didn't differentiate pseudo-divine metal in such a manner. As such, the divine demon sword had only taken a small step forward by reaching the level of 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. Ling Han continued forward. Following the advance of the divine demon sword, its engulfing ability became even more astonishing. Previously, it had only been able to engulf the metallic essence in the nearby 30 meters. Now, however, this range had expanded to 60 meters. Wherever the divine demon sword passed, there wouldn't be a single iota of regulation of metal remaining. Small tower, what exactly is devouring metal? Ling Han couldn't help but ask. Divine metal. Moreover, there's a sliver of chance that it can surpass all divine metal in the future, becoming a peerless existence, Small Tower replied in a calm voice. So you're saying that it can engulf divine metal and continue to advance? Finally, you're not stupid beyond saving, Small Tower said. It was clearly praising him, yet Ling Han couldn't feel joy no matter what. How extravagant! Divine metal? Even celestial kings couldn't necessarily obtain such a matter to forge a celestial tool. However, the divine demon sword needed to be nurtured by divine metal such that it could continue to grow. Absorbing divine metal to grow. Even retards would understand the freakish nature of this. Ling Han couldn't help but yearn for that time. When he became a celestial king, no, a high-level celestial king, he could perhaps give this a try. If he could truly obtain a transcendent celestial tool, wouldn't that be fun? Ling Han chuckled to himself. He was getting way too ahead of himself. The first step was to transform the divine demon sword into a genuine celestial tool. Ling Han, you're not celebrating with everyone else, and you're instead wandering around here by yourself. Perhaps you're doing something shameful? Someone sneered in a cold voice. A person suddenly appeared behind him. Lan Tianyu. Chapter 2022, Battle with Lan Tianyu. Chapter 2022, Battle with Lan Tianyu. Lan Tianyu's black hair was flowing and untied, and this gave him the charisma of an unrestrained and wild individual. Lan Tianyu, Ling Han said with a nod. He sheathed his sword as he turned around to face this powerful opponent. Lan Tianyu cracked a smile and said, I heard Xiao Jun say that you tried to lead others astray in the resting room. At that time, I already realized that you were unreliable, so I decided to keep an eye on you. Sure enough, I discovered that you immediately vanished after the battle. After looking around for a while, I finally found you again. So what? Ling Han asked in a calm voice. Since he had been discovered, they would simply resolve this with a battle. Was he afraid? I knew that a person like you couldn't possibly be subdued. You simply put up a show so you could save your own skin. However, I'm truly very curious. Why have you suddenly decided to tunnel underground? Perhaps you discovered something? Lan Tianyu asked in curiosity. Ling Han smiled and said, Oh, there's something underground? Perhaps this is some secret? Lan Tianyu stared at Ling Han for a moment before saying, Even though I find this hard to believe, I have to concede that a person like you won't do something for no good reason. So, you definitely discovered something, am I correct? Discovered something? Ling Han replied with a faint smile. Lan Tianyu was trying to pry information from Ling Han. He wanted to see if Ling Han had truly discovered the source power of heaven and earth that was hidden underground. If he had discovered it, then it was extremely likely that he wasn't acting alone. Instead, he was most likely being supported by some powerful figure. If that were the case, then they definitely couldn't let their guard down. To say nothing of the fact that their island master was only at the ascending origin tier, above which there was still the celestial king tier. What would it matter even if their island master were at the celestial king tier? They were like pests of heaven and earth, pests that were hunted and despised by everyone. There's a source power of heaven and earth here, Lan Tianyu said slowly. He stared at Ling Han as he said this, examining the minute changes in his expression. However, Ling Han remained calm and composed, and he said, I'm also very curious. Your elder brother is at the ascending origin tier, so why are you such a disappointment? How are you only at the dividing soul tier? Lan Tianyu humphed and said, My progress is slow because I'm reaching the level of perfection for each cultivation level. When I advance to the 9th lotus, which is equivalent to the ascending origin tier, I'll be invincible among those at my cultivation level. Ling Han couldn't help but bend down in laughter. Say, can you stop being so self-confident? Your aptitude is indeed slightly stronger than that of those at the king tier. You can just barely be considered as an emperor tier. However, once you can't draw on external power, what right will you have to stand here and say that you're invincible among those at the same cultivation level? Trash like you then is abundant in the eastern and western celestial realm. This was naturally an exaggeration. To say nothing of emperor tiers, even king tiers were rare in the two celestial realms. However, as a top-tier monarch tier, Ling Han often came across fellow prodigies at the same level. As such, he naturally felt like such prodigies were abundant in number. Lan Tianyu exploded in rage upon hearing this. He stared daggers at Ling Han, and a strong killing intent exuded from his body. He had always been proud of his talent and aptitude, and he thought nothing of all other prodigies. It was because he was stuck in this place that he hadn't been able to make a name for himself. Now, however, Ling Han actually dared to belittle his talent. He couldn't endure this. He definitely couldn't endure this. You actually dare to question my talent? He asked in rage. Ling Han scoffed and said, Right now, I'm at the late stage of Yang Soul. What cultivation level are you at? Not only that, but even after drawing on the power of the sh*tty deity or whatnot, You're still unable to defeat me. What right do you have to mention the words talent before me? Lan Tianyu was rendered speechless. His cultivation level was equivalent to the peak stage of Yin Soul. However, without the power of the deity, his battle prowess would only be invincible among those at Earth Soul. It was still some way off from reaching Heaven Soul. Compared to Ling Han, he was indeed far inferior. Ling Han was truly a prodigy. Moreover, he was far more talented than Lan Tianyu. This caused the latter to feel wild with jealousy. Since he was inferior, he would simply kill Ling Han. That way, there would be no one who was more prodigious than him. I initially planned to spare you. However, you're seeking death yourself, Lan Tianyu said in a baleful voice. Ling Han roared with laughter as he brandished his divine demon sword. Then come battle. With a flash, he charged at Lan Tianyu. During their previous battle, Lan Tianyu had enjoyed a small advantage. This wasn't because Ling Han was weaker, but it was because the latter hadn't wanted to unleash his trump cards. However, a battle to the death was different. He would unleash his full power to annihilate his opponent. Most importantly, the divine demon sword had advanced to the level of 4-star pseudo-celestial tool. This was equivalent to reaching Heaven Soul. Whoosh! With a single slash, space was severed and clouds were obliterated. The surrounding earth was instantly shattered into nothingness. Lan Tianyu was astonished. Ling Han's cultivation was clearly unchanged, yet his battle prowess had surprisingly become several times more powerful. This was simply inconceivable. It was that sword. A mere sword can actually elevate your battle prowess by so much? How astonishing! Lan Tianyu's feeling of jealousy became even stronger. His opponent was more talented than him, and he even possessed a peerless divine sword. It's mine, he roared. Boom! He became enveloped in a black aura, and a black lotus with 7 petals also materialized between his brows. He immediately launched a counterattack. Boom! Ling Han's sword slashed down, and Lan Tianyu was instantly sent flying, crashing into the wall with a thundering boom. This collision sent him flying back, and he couldn't help but shudder due to the forceful impact. He felt as uncomfortable as could be. At this moment, Ling Han had already caught up, and he immediately launched another slash. Lan Tianyu had no time to feel astonished, and he could only spit a burst of black air with a loud roar. This burst of air transformed into a violent column of flames, amid which a black symbol was materializing. This wasn't a symbol of the Great Tao. Ling Han was certain of this. After all, this symbol was completely different from the Great Tao of heaven and earth that he understood. If this had been a symbol of the Great Tao, it would have intertwined and resonated with the regulations of heaven and earth. Hang on. Ling Han could sense mysterious power traveling over from above them, from the direction of the ancient castle. This power was fusing together with the black symbol, causing it to become more powerful. Boom! The black symbol smashed over with terrifying power. Ling Han sneered upon seeing this. He then clenched his fists and replied with a punch. Boom! The shock wave of the collision caused the newly created cave to shudder violently, with stone debris and dust raining down. It was as if the cave were about to collapse at any moment. Haha, your strength is only SOSO. Watch how I behead you, Lan Tianyu said with a loud laugh. Without his divine sword, Ling Han's battle prowess was no different from before. Since he had been able to enjoy an advantage before, he could naturally replicate the same feat again. Is that so? Ling Han said. He launched a flurry of punches, showing no signs of shirking from Lan Tianyu's attacks. He would face his attacks head-on. He still needed to obtain the source power of heaven and earth, so he had no time to waste here. That being the case, he would end this battle as quickly as possible. He would end the life of his opponent. You're seeking death, Lan Tianyu said with a cold sneer. He was enjoying the protection of a deity, so his defenses were as powerful as could be. As such, facing him head-on would be nothing more than seeking death. I hope you can remain stubborn until the very end, Ling Han said with a smile. Pong, pong, pong. They exchanged a flurry of punches in quick succession. Lan Tianyu couldn't help but feel shocked. This was because his bones were already creaking under stress. However, Ling Han was still completely unscathed. How is this possible? Why, you're wearing some kind of protective armor? Lan Tianyu exclaimed. He didn't dare to face Ling Han head-on anymore. In his mind, there was only a single answer to Ling Han's defenses being stronger than his. Ling Han scoffed upon hearing this, and he couldn't be bothered explaining. Instead, he summoned his 9 heavens flame divided soul. Normally, this divided soul would comprehend the great Tao under the reincarnation tree, allowing Ling Han to continually improve his cultivation. At this moment, Ling Han unleashed his heaven-destroying 9 swords, while his divided soul was bathed in flames as it scorched heaven and earth with the 9 heavens flame. Chapter 2023, Bottom of the Cave. Chapter 2023, Bottom of the Cave. Lan Tianyu's situation became increasingly dire. He was indeed very powerful, especially with the aid of the deity. Both his offensive and defensive power were elevated by a significant amount. However, in terms of offensive power, Ling Han had both the divine demon sword and the 9 heavens flame, a source power of heaven and earth. Meanwhile, in terms of defensive power, who in the dividing soul tier could rival Ling Han? During their previous battle, Ling Han had barely revealed any of his power. Now, however, he was unleashing his full power, so Lan Tianyu was naturally under immense pressure. How could there be so many monarch tiers in the world? Lan Tianyu was only a monarch tier in name, but not in reality. Humph! Lan Tianyu gritted his teeth and turned around to flee. He couldn't defeat Ling Han, so he naturally had no choice but to flee. Since I'm unleashing my full power, do you really think you can escape? Ling Han said with a cold chuckle. Like a bolt of lightning, he immediately flashed before Lan Tianyu, blocking his path of retreat. Detestable! Lan Tianyu roared. He unleashed a wave of attacks, yet he was unable to breach Ling Han's defense no matter what. That being the case, he had no choice but to continue his battle with Ling Han. His mind was filled with shock. Even though he could still barely rival Ling Han at this moment, he definitely couldn't hold on for much longer. After all, the divine demon sword was far too terrifying, and the 9 heavens flame was far too devastating. No, he definitely had to flee. He had to report this to his older brother. The ship crew had told him that Ling Han hadn't come here with them. Instead, they had rescued him during their journey. In such a vast sea, just what were the chances of this happening? Thus, Ling Han was definitely here with a plan, and he was definitely hiding his identity while mingling with these people. There was definitely a powerful figure standing behind him. As such, he couldn't underestimate Ling Han. However, Lan Tianyu clearly hadn't considered the unbelievably low chances of encountering a giant storm at sea and being pushed to this island. In any case, he was fully convinced about his own belief. To Ling Han, however, Lan Tianyu's speculations didn't matter at all. After all, the other man was going to be a dead person soon. Meanwhile, Lan Tianyu felt immeasurable regret. After discovering Ling Han's disappearance, he hadn't told anyone else, and he had simply started to search for Ling Han himself. This was because, in his mind, Ling Han was definitely no match for him. That being the case, would he need to inform anyone else? To his shock, however, Ling Han actually possessed so many trump cards. Not only did he possess a peerless sword, but he could even unleash such devastating flames as a dividing soul tier cultivator. This was utterly petrifying. Lan Tianyu finally reached a resolution in his mind. He would unleash his full power and disregard his safety in an attempt to flee. However, each time he succeeded in fleeing, Ling Han would quickly catch up again. At that time, he would be plunged into a perilous situation again. Moreover, the cost of breaking free was suffering several bloody gashes in his body and having his bones broken and his flesh burned by terrifying fists of flames. If they had been closer to the surface of the ground, he could have broken free even if it meant suffering severe wounds. Now, however, they were far too deep underground. This caused him to be overcome with despair. There was simply no way for him to escape. If you dare to kill me, You won't be able to survive either. Lan Tianyu gritted his teeth and shouted, I urge you to immediately stop this battle. I can show you a path to leave this place. Ling Han sneered and said, Don't you think I'm trying to obtain the firm essence green gold? Before obtaining this treasure, why should I leave? As he said this, his attacks didn't slow down at all. His nine heavens flame-divided soul more so continued to scorch the surroundings with its flaming fists. You're hilariously wrong, Lan Tianyu shouted. My older brother is guarding the firm essence green gold, so you won't be able to get near it at all. Yet, you think that you can enter this island at will, and you can also leave this island with ease. We discovered you people long ago, and we noticed that there was no ascending origin tier elite among you. It was because of this that we allowed you onto the island. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to discover this island even if you'd searched for it your entire life. Similarly, without my guidance, you'll find that you can't leave this island at all. No matter how you sail, you'll only be able to go in circles in the nearby sea. You'll never be able to leave. Ling Han replied with an, oh. Sure enough, apart from the giant storm, everything else had been the doing of these islanders. He smiled and said, Thank you for telling me. However, I've still decided to kill you. Why? Lan Tianyu stammered. He was completely stunned by Ling Han's decision. Why was there such a strange person in the world? Why did he insist on seeking death? Because I won't die, Ling Han said in a calm voice. He was brimming with confidence. Where is your confidence coming from? Lan Tianyu felt like he was about to go crazy. How had he come across such a person? Ling Han was only at the dividing soul tier, yet he actually dared to be so confident and cocky? No, you'll definitely die. You'll definitely die a miserable death, he roared. After learning that Ling Han was intent on killing him, he finally gave up on all hope. He did everything he could to break free. After all, staying put would only mean dying a little slower. If he fought with his life, he might still have a sliver of a chance to survive. However, this was naturally a futile struggle. Pooh! Ling Han's sword pierced Lan Tianyu's chest. Before an expression of despair could even spread across Lan Tianyu's face, the flaming fist of the nine heavens flame-divided soul had already smashed over. Boom! With a crack, Lan Tianyu's head exploded into smithereens. However, not a single drop of blood sprayed into the surroundings. This was because they were instantly vaporized by the scorching flames. Ling Han retracted his sword and drew his nine heavens flame-divided soul back into the Black Tower, where it would continue to cultivate. Such a lengthy delay, but it should be fine, right? Ling Han murmured to himself. He continued to hurriedly advance with his sword. After another hour or so, he suddenly felt his body tilting forward slightly. To his surprise, there was no more resistance before him. However, a dividing soul tier elite naturally wouldn't fall so easily. He immediately steadied himself. A path surprisingly appeared before him. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. This was a path that had been dug out by the residents of this island. Lying at the end of this path was naturally the firm essence green gold. What a coincidence. Ling Han nodded upon seeing this. He had forged his own path while searching for the firm essence green gold, and his path had coincidentally intersected with the path that the residents of the island had dug. The chances of this happening were most likely very minuscule. However, it had happened to him. Ling Han concealed the path that he had created before continuing down the one created by the residents. At this moment, he didn't need to use his divine demon sword to absorb the regulations of metal anymore. Instead, he could advance at a brisk pace. After another 30 minutes, the area in front of him suddenly opened up. This was a colossal cave. The radius of this cave measured 3,000 meters or so, and its depth was more so extremely astonishing. Before Ling Han could even lean forward to observe this cave, a burst of murderous aura suddenly rose from its depths and slashed into the roof, where it left a deep gash. What devastating destructive ability! Ling Han was already well aware of the composition of this place. Dirt and stone had already transformed into metal, and they were as stiff and tough as could be. Even his full-power strike could only leave a small dent in the wall. Only by using his divine demon sword to absorb the regulations of metal of the surroundings could he hope to cause any significant damage. However, this burst of murderous aura had managed to leave a gash of several feet deep in the roof of the cave. This was truly terrifying. The firm essence green gold was definitely at the bottom of this cave. Ling Han immediately leaped forward. Whoosh! He then immediately entered the Black Tower. Allowing gravity to do its work, the Black Tower instantly plunged down. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Bursts of murderous aura continued to slash over from the bottom of the cave. However, because the Black Tower was far too small, it was naturally incredibly difficult for it to be hit. However, there were still times when the Black Tower was hit, causing it to strike the sides of the cave before bouncing back and continuing to fall. Like a pebble thrown down a well, the Black Tower continued to ping-pong back and forth. Only after a whopping 2 hours did it finally come to rest. It had reached the bottom. This cave was truly very deep. Moreover, this place was still huge, with a radius of 1,500 meters or so. In the center region, there rested a piece of green metal. Right now, a middle-aged man was standing 30 or so meters away from it. Chapter 2024, Astonishing Conversation. Chapter 2024, Astonishing Conversation. This middle-aged man looked no different from normal people, and there was no aura of power or dominance about him. If there were anything unusual about him, then it was the black lotus symbol between his brows. This was a lotus with 9 petals, and it was so black that one couldn't help but feel apprehension. Is this the island master? Ling Han observed him from within the Black Tower. He didn't act rashly. The firm essence green gold was right before him, and he could already feel its boundless might even though he was still inside the Black Tower. Metal this was a matter that possessed a razor-sharp, murderous aura. It was capable of annihilating all matter. Ling Han couldn't help but frown. The firm essence green gold was right before him, but how was he going to obtain it? Leave the Black Tower? That would be seeking death. Fortunately, the middle-aged man wasn't showing signs of trying to obtain the firm essence green gold anytime soon, either. Whoosh! At this moment, a figure suddenly descended into the cave, avoiding the bursts of murderous auras as it did so. This person landed beside the middle-aged man. This person also had a lotus with 9 petals between his brows. Brother Che, the middle-aged man said with a nod. The new arrival was also a middle-aged man. However, he was more solidly built, and he stared at the firm essence green gold as he said, Brother Lan, we've already waited for several million years. Now, it's finally time to reap the rewards. Heh, we haven't wasted all these years either. With this island as our base, we've sent many people into the outside world to spread the magnificence of our religion, the first middle-aged man said with a chuckle. He was none other than the island master, Lan Tianyu. The other middle-aged man was called Che Yuanhua. He also chuckled before saying, the world is filled with foolish people. Even though the cultivation system of our sect is more powerful, they still resist it with such passion and fervor. They almost destroyed our sect, so we have no choice but to act covertly. These days are nearing an end. We're about to write a new chapter in history. Their eyes were gleaming, and they appeared as excited as could be. After obtaining this source power of heaven and earth, Sect Master will definitely reward us richly. At that time, we might be able to reach the 10th lotus. Ling Han was astounded upon hearing this. This was a large organization. Ascent Route Island was only the tip of the iceberg. 10th lotus? Both of these people had a lotus with 9 petals between their brows. Following this logic, the 10th lotus would allow their lotuses to gain another petal. Lan Ruaji had mentioned that the island master was at a cultivation level equivalent to the ascending origin tier. Since he was at the 9th lotus, the 10th lotus would most likely mean reaching the consummate level of the ascending origin tier. Perhaps it might even equate to the celestial king tier. Moreover, even the dispatched individuals were at the ascending origin tier, so just what cultivation level were the higher-ups of the sect at? What cultivation level was the sect master at? Judging from their conversation, members of their sect had already entered the eastern and western celestial realms, where they were spreading this new cultivation system and popularizing their deity. However, perhaps this was only occurring among those at lower cultivation levels, and it was because of this that Ling Han hadn't been aware of it. However, one had to realize that even though elites were mighty and domineering, with celestial kings being able to decide the fate of a battle, it was those at the lower levels who were the true foundation of heaven and earth. If the majority of lower-level beings transitioned to this new cultivation system, this expanse of heaven and earth wouldn't be far from collapse and destruction. However, Ling Han found this extremely strange. If this expanse of heaven and earth collapsed, what good would that be to these people? Or perhaps they weren't aware of their own danger at all. Perhaps the allure of power had clouded their judgment. That being the case, what force was trying to destroy this world? Ling Han was struck with astonishment. According to Small Tower, heavenly venerates were the most powerful beings of the celestial realm. They had genuinely broken free from the grasp of the world. In fact, the original owner of the Black Tower was such a heavenly venerate. However, he had died. Whom had he been killed by? Perhaps he had been killed by the founder of this different cultivation system? At this moment, a torrent of thoughts surged through Ling Han's mind. His hands and feet felt ice-cold. The level of this conflict was already far beyond what he could control. In fact, even Ninth Heaven celestial kings didn't have the right to participate in this conflict. If they did, they would be nothing more than cannon fodder. Ji Wuming had reincarnated to recultivate, and he more so gave off a demeanor of representing justice. Perhaps he had also noticed this impending danger? Perhaps it was because of this that he had resolutely decided to reincarnate. Ling Han asked himself, if the celestial realm were facing impending disaster, would he sacrifice a portion of prodigies for the sake of his family, friends, and lovers? His answer to this was something that he didn't dare face. For the sake of the greater good, it was necessary for one to make some small sacrifices. Anyone could say this. However, who would be willing to be sacrificed? For example, what if someone said that the celestial realm would be eternally safe as long as Ling Han committed suicide, and it would face destruction otherwise? Would Ling Han be willing to commit suicide? As his mind conflicted over this, he suddenly felt warmth wrapping around his hands. The Empress and Hunyou had walked over to hold his hands, causing his disquiet mind to immediately find some tranquility. His mind became resolute. For the sake of his lovers, so what if he became a demon? Brother Lan, it's almost time to start, correct? Che Yuanhua said. Lan Tianyu nodded and said, Brother Che, let's channel the spiritual technique of death together. All right. The two elites pressed their hands together. Wang. A burst of mystical power instantly surged forth, transforming into a hand that grabbed at the firm essence green gold. Wang. The piece of green metal immediately unleashed a burst of sword light, easily obliterating the giant hand. Ah, Ma, and I, Chu Luo. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu chanted some peculiar spell in unison. Wang. The two stone statues before the ancient castle immediately reacted to their chants, imbuing them with some kind of mystical power. This power was in stark contrast and opposition to the great Tao of heaven and earth, and it immediately triggered a reaction from heaven and earth. Crack! Dark clouds rumbled above the island, with lightning flashing and heavenly tribulation imminent. This cultivation system was facing stern resistance from heaven and earth. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu started to recite the spell even quicker, with countless symbols materializing and rushing toward the firm essence green gold. Like a range of mountains, these symbols caused the source power of heaven and earth to continually quake. It seemed terrified, and it was as if it wanted to flee. However, it was unable to do so. Ling Han was astonished by what he saw. These two people were clearly only at the ascending origin tier, so in theory, they shouldn't have been able to suppress a source power of heaven and earth. Now, however, it looked as if they were genuinely suppressing the firm essence green gold. He could feel the mystical power traveling over from the stone statues before the ancient castle. In fact, this was what astonished him the most. What in the world was this power? It could actually suppress a source power of heaven and earth? No, they're not trying to obtain the source power of heaven and earth. Instead, they're trying to destroy it. Ling Han already possessed 3 source powers of heaven and earth, so he could clearly feel his distaste toward this mystical power. Like fire and water, these 2 powers were things that couldn't coexist. Victory of one power would signify the destruction of the other power. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were indeed not powerful enough. However, after drawing on the power of the stone statues, they could even destroy a source power of heaven and earth. This was far too astounding. Destroying a source power of heaven and earth is equivalent to dealing a severe blow to heaven and earth, Small Tower said in a calm voice. Source powers of heaven and earth were equivalent to children of heaven and earth. Thus, destroying them would wound heaven and earth, and it would bring great grief upon heaven and earth. This was a destructive blow. Ling Han couldn't allow them to continue. He planned to draw on the power of the Black Tower to fight against them. Even if he couldn't obtain this source power of heaven and earth, he could still at least distract Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu. That way, they wouldn't be able to destroy the firm essence green gold with such ease. He was indeed not powerful enough. However, the Black Tower wasn't weak. After all, this had been the treasure of a heavenly venerate. Boom! Right at this moment, a column of light suddenly descended from above him. A person then descended from the sky. Xiao Gu. Chapter 2025, Reappearance of Xiao Gu. Chapter 2025, Reappearance of Xiao Gu. A figure directly charged down from the sky above the island. They smashed through the thick earth, and they appeared at the bottom of this cave like a god. Along with them, they also brought the dazzling light of the starry sky. This was a spectacular sight. Moreover, to Ling Han's surprise, he actually recognized this person. It was Xiao Gu, who should have been in the ancient realm. Ling Han's mouth was slightly agape. It was clear that he was struck with shock. When he had needed to open the gates to the celestial realm, he had once invited Xiao Gu to come along with him. However, Xiao Gu had insisted on remaining in the ancient realm. It was seemingly because he had some unfinished business there. Now, however, he had actually appeared here so suddenly. This was completely beyond Ling Han's imagination. Moreover, Xiao Gu was so powerful now that even Ling Han couldn't determine his exact cultivation. Yaya! Xiao Gu exclaimed. After so many years, he still hadn't changed much. His speech was still like that of an infant, yet his power was simply heaven-defying. His descending fist was filled with power and dominance. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were astonished by his sudden arrival. It was clear that they hadn't expected a person to suddenly descend from the sky. They hurriedly launched attacks to block Xiao Gu. Boom! Xiao Gu was sent flying up by this exchange. Meanwhile, Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were pushed down into the ground. In fact, their feet had already sunk into the ground. One had to realize that the earth here had been transformed into metal by the firm essence green gold, so it was as tough as could be. Yet, the attack of Xiao Gu had actually caused them to sink into the ground. This was a perfect reflection of the overwhelming nature of Xiao Gu's punch. Yaya! Die! 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 Xiao Gu exclaimed. His appearance was no different from before, and he hadn't undergone any changes after becoming more powerful. He charged down from the sky again, launching another punch. Several symbols of the great Tao bloomed around him. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu exchanged a glance. They could see the shock and confusion in each other's eyes. This island was being protected by a formation, and it was as concealed as could be. As long as they didn't actively deactivate this formation, even low-level celestial kings wouldn't be able to discover it. This was the major reason why this island remained so mysterious. It was not because of its small size. Powerful elites couldn't discover this island at all. Meanwhile, weaker cultivators wouldn't need to think about leaving if they arrived on this island. Even if they could leave, they would have already become a member of this island. Yet, This mysterious elite was clearly only at the ascending origin tier. That being the case, how had he discovered Ascent Route Island? We can't let him escape, Lan Tianyu said. Che Yuanhua nodded in agreement. Their sect couldn't be exposed, so they had to dispose of all people who weren't part of them. The two elites didn't simply defend this time. Instead, they unleashed all kinds of secret techniques to attack Xiao. It was clear that they were part of the same cultivation system. Even though there were slight differences, their foundation was still ultimately the same. The lotus petals on their foreheads blossomed, with each blossoming petal causing their battle prowess to rise by another level. Xiao was facing two elites by himself, yet he wasn't being pushed onto his back foot at all. One of his bones was glowing, and it summoned a dazzling symbol of the great Tao that bestowed him with boundless power. Fuck, how is Xiao's strength advancing so quickly? Ling Han was already very proud of his quick advance in cultivation level. Compared to Xiao, however, he was still lagging very far behind. That glowing bone of Xiao was definitely the bone of a celestial king. Otherwise, how could it be so vicious and powerful? Right now, it could even rival the power of ascending origin tier elites. In any case, he could seize this opportunity to obtain the firm essence green gold. Ling Han silently exited the Black Tower. He then channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, and it was as if he were a blooming flower trying to attract the attention of a pollinating bee. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were both deeply astonished by the sudden appearance of another person. With their strength, they surprisingly hadn't discovered that Ling Han had been hiding near them the entire time. Moreover, this person was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator. They wanted to stop Ling Han, yet Xiao was far too vicious and powerful. He blocked their path, disallowing them from approaching Ling Han. However, they immediately calmed down. Even they had to rely on the power of the deity if they wanted to obtain the source power of heaven and earth, so how could a measly dividing soul tier cultivator succeed? Meanwhile, Xiao was definitely a formidable foe who they had to treat with utmost care. They had to dispose of Xiao first. Ling Han. Xiao stammered. His voice was filled with delight. Ling Han simply nodded in acknowledgement. Right now, he didn't have the time to greet Xiao. There were few opportunities to obtain source powers of heaven and earth, so he definitely had to remain completely focused. Wong, Wong, Wong. Numerous symbols of the great Tao started to light up on Ling Han's body, glowing at times and appearing dim at others. This was already beyond the power of the dividing soul tier. In fact, its appearance was not because Ling Han had summoned it, but rather because the indestructible Heaven Scroll was resonating with heaven and earth. The firm essence green gold also started to glow. Moreover, it was shuddering slightly, and symbols of the great Tao also lit up on its surface. The two of them were performing some kind of communication. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were shocked upon seeing this. This measly dividing soul tier cultivator actually possessed the ability to obtain the firm essence green gold. This was far too unfathomable. Brother Che, go and kill that brat, Lan Tianyu said. I'll hold this person back. Obtaining this source power of heaven and earth was a critical matter for the sect. Otherwise, Lan Tianyu wouldn't have guarded this place for several million years. Thus, he definitely couldn't allow Ling Han to obtain the firm essence green gold. If he failed, he would suffer severe punishment from the sect. I'm on it, Che Yuanhua replied. He turned around to charge at Ling Han. He only needed to unleash a single strike. Yaya! Xiao exclaimed as he reached over to block Che Yuanhua. Damn it! Lan Tianyu cursed. Xiao was more powerful than him, and his defenses were also incredible. In fact, he would seem unscathed even after suffering an attack head-on. Lan Tianyu hurriedly composed himself and launched another ferocious attack at Xiao. He had to hold Xiao back no matter what. Boom, boom, boom. The three elites were engaged in an intense battle. One of them wanted to break free to dispose of Ling Han, while another was attempting to stop Xiao. Meanwhile, Xiao was trying to stop the person who was trying to attack Ling Han. This was indeed a vicious and complicated battle. Elsewhere, Ling Han remained completely focused on trying to obtain the firm essence green gold. He trusted Xiao Gu, and he believed that Xiao Gu could definitely hold the two people back. However, was obtaining a source power of heaven and earth an easy matter? 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Sure enough, Xiao Gu didn't betray Ling Han's trust. He successfully held Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu back, preventing them from launching even a single attack at Ling Han. Wong, wong, wong. The vibration of the firm essence green gold became increasingly intense. Countless symbols materialized on its surface, intertwining at an indescribable speed. These were clearly displays of the most valuable Tao of metal, yet none of them could manage to comprehend or capture it. At some point in time, the firm essence green gold suddenly shot toward Ling Han. Damn it! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were shocked upon seeing this. The firm essence green gold was about to be obtained by Ling Han. Humph! Che Yuanhua roared in anger, facing an attack of Xiao Gu head-on as he finally found an opportunity to break free. He immediately launched a palm strike at Ling Han. This strike was slightly astray as Che Yuanhua had been affected by Xiao Gu. However, it could still scrape Ling Han. This attack was equivalent to that of an ascending origin tier elite, so just how devastating was it? Even if one were only scraped by this attack, they might still be killed by its vast and terrifying power. Pooh! Ling Han was instantly obliterated into a cloud of blood. Boom! A burst of flames erupted, and the firm essence green gold immediately disappeared into this ball of blazing flames. Chapter 2026, Harvest. Chapter 2026, Harvest. A look of disdain spread across Che Yuanhua's face. Was this measly dividing soul tier cultivator worthy of fighting for a treasure with them? What a joke. Bad person. Xiao Gu roared in fury. He immediately threw a vicious punch. Che Yuanhua had no time to retrieve Ling Han's dropped treasures. Ling Han definitely possessed rare treasures. Otherwise, how could a dividing soul tier cultivator have escaped their detection? However, Xiao Gu's attacks were far too overwhelming, so he had to deal with them first. He had been struck by Xiao Gu just then, and he could still feel the pain of that strike deep in his bones. Boom! Flames curled through the surroundings, and a paramount aura started to permeate. Damn it! This is the immortal phoenix tribes rising from the ashes. Lan Tianyu exclaimed in astonishment. **T. Che Yuanhua's expression also changed drastically. However, could he still attack Ling Han at this moment? No, this was simply impossible. Xiao Gu was already unleashing a wave of frenzied attacks. Boom, boom, boom. The symbols on his celestial bones started to dazzle, causing his battle prowess to rise explosively. His attacks were so ferocious that Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were reduced to an extremely disheveled state. They could barely protect themselves, so how could they possibly attack Ling Han? This was unless they were willing to exchange a life for a life. However, sacrificing a 9th Lotus Elite in order to kill a dividing soul tier cultivator? What an absolute joke. Boom! Flames flickered and danced, transforming into a colossal phoenix that quickly crumbled and vanished. From amid the raging flames, a young man walked forth. Was this not Ling Han? Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu looked over, only to see the firm essence green gold vanishing into Ling Han's chest. That was clearly an unbelievably tough piece of metal, yet at this moment, it was as fluid as water. Damn it! Damn it! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu roared in frustration. However, so what if Ling Han had obtained the source power of heaven and earth? As long as they captured him, their supremely powerful sect master could naturally extract the source power of heaven and earth. That being the case, they would kill Xiao Gu first. The two elites exchanged a glance, and they could both see the resolution in each other's eyes. They unleashed a loud roar. Wong! The lotus between their brows bloomed, upon which a giant lotus also materialized behind their backs. The lotuses swayed slightly, and as they resonated, The two stone statues before the ancient castle instantly bestowed them with even more power, raising the battle prowess of the two elites. However, activating this technique clearly came at a cost. Streaks of blood appeared on the elites' faces, necks, hands, and wherever else Ling Han could see. Their skin split apart, and blood gushed forth. It was as if their skin were about to split open and be shed from their bodies. They started to launch a ferocious counterattack, and they were intent on suppressing and killing Xiao Gu. Upon seeing Ling Han come back to life, Xiao Gu's rage instantly subsided by a significant amount. Along with it, his battle prowess also fell by a significant amount. With him becoming weaker and the two elites becoming stronger, their battle prowess suddenly became very evenly matched. In fact, Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu even enjoyed a slight edge. However, Xiao Gu's physique was indeed very powerful. One had to realize that his body wasn't real, and it was actually something that he had summoned. Thus, it wouldn't matter even if his body were obliterated. In reality, he was only a single bone. As long as his celestial bone wasn't broken, he wouldn't be killed. In fact, this was most likely the bone of a celestial king, a high-level celestial king. Thus, could it be broken by two ascending origin tier elites? Ling Han wasn't worried about Xiao Gu at all. Right now, he was fusing together with the source power of heaven and earth, and this was causing a tremendous change in his Dantian. Another source power of heaven and earth had arrived. Even though the nine heavens flame had ventured out, the source power that it represented was still unchanged. It was still one of Ling Han's three source powers. Thus, this was now a gathering of four source powers, so it was naturally extremely lively. There was a moment of struggle, and with Ling Han's interference, the source powers finally reached a point of equilibrium. The nine heavens flame, Xianin source water, fiery flame lightning strike wood, and firm essence green gold naturally conquered the large majority of the territory. Meanwhile, the combined territory occupied by the power of time, the power of space, the power of slaughter, and the power of lightning was smaller than the territory occupied by any one of the source powers of heaven and earth. This was inevitable. After all, source powers of heaven and earth were essentially equivalent to celestial kings. A smile tugged at the corners of Ling Han's lips. He now possessed four source powers of heaven and earth. This was incredibly impressive. At this moment, he could advance another step in the dividing soul tier. Moreover, since he was now aware that one needed to divide their souls 9 times to reach a state of perfection, he wouldn't shirk no matter what. He definitely had to reach a state of perfection for this cultivation level. Thus, he was in desperate need of source powers of heaven and earth. The more the better. He raised a hand. Wong. An orb of green light appeared above his palm, and it radiated with a terrifying murderous aura. This wasn't an aura of slaughter. Instead, it was the aura of sharpness and murder of the source power of metal. Metal represented sharpness. Ling Han casually waved his hand. Whoosh! A burst of sword chi instantly swept forth, creating a faint gash in the metallic floor beneath him. Even though this was only a faint gash, one had to realize that this floor had been strengthened by a source power of heaven and earth. Indeed, even the battle between Xiao Gu and the two elders was unable to cause any great damage to this floor. At most, they could only leave some small dents. Now, however, Ling Han was able to leave a faint gash. This destructive power was heaven-defying, as expected of this source power. Ling Han combined this power with the regulation of slaughter as he launched another strike. There was a loud screech as another gash appeared on the metallic floor. This gash was even deeper than the previous one. Sure enough, the combination of two regulations would lead to even greater destructive power. Enlightenment arose in Ling Han's mind. Regulations could be used in combination. For example, if one could only wield a single one of the 5 elements, they would be unable to rival the regulations of time and the regulations of space of celestial kings. If they could wield all of the 5 elements, however, the situation would be completely different. The 5 elements existed in unison and opposition, and if they were channeled correctly, they could unleash a devastating might. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Among them, Ling Han was only missing a source power of earth. Right now, he was extremely eager to complete the 5 elements. He was extremely curious about how powerful his attacks would become after he fused the regulations of the 5 elements together. Perhaps, he would become as powerful as Ji Wuming. Ling Han clenched his fists. Even though he had almost been evenly matched with Ji Wuming during their last battle, he understood that his battle prowess was still slightly inferior to the other parties. Moreover, obtaining this source power of heaven and earth wouldn't make much difference. After all, Ji Wuming was the reincarnation of a 9th heaven celestial king. As such, the regulations that he wielded were most likely all at the celestial king tier. This was equivalent to possessing various source powers of heaven and earth. It was because of this that Ji Wuming was more powerful than him, even though they were at the same cultivation level. I can't help but feel eager with anticipation. After I obtain a source power of earth, I'll challenge Ji Wuming to another duel. Ling Han murmured to himself. His eyes were gleaming with fighting spirit. Now, however, he unsheathed his divine demon sword. There was so much godly metal here, so how could he waste it? The divine demon sword's appetite was instantly aroused, and it started to voraciously devour the surrounding godly metal. Wang. The regulations of metal were continuously absorbed by the divine demon sword, and it was as if the sword were being reforged. Incredible! Soar to the level of celestial tool. Ling Han knew that he was dreaming. However, this wouldn't affect anyone, would it? Boom! The battle between Xiao and the 2 elites became increasingly intense and violent. In fact, the cave was now filled with countless small dents. Their battle continued to drag on. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. The earth quaked and mountains shook, and even Ling Han couldn't withstand the shock waves of their battle anymore. He had no choice but to retreat into the Black Tower. However, he left the divine demon sword outside, where it could continue to absorb the essence of metal. After around 7 days, the essence of metal in the surroundings was almost completely exhausted. This was easily observed from the battle between the 3 elites. Instead of just small dents, they could now blast giant craters in the surrounding cave walls. In fact, seawater was flowing in from some of the craters, and this was tangible evidence of just how ruined the surrounding area had already become. Leave! Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu suddenly leaped into the sky. Chapter 2027, Power of the Poisonous Fruit. Chapter 2027, Power of the Poisonous Fruit. After battling for several days, Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua discovered that Xiao couldn't be hurt. It wasn't that he couldn't be injured. Rather, it was useless even if they wounded him. In fact, they had once managed to shatter Xiaogu's head after making huge sacrifices themselves. However, what use had it been? Xiao had casually regrown another head. In reality, Xiaogu's entire body was a creation of his. As long as his celestial bone existed, he would exist. Thus, what did it matter if his head were smashed? At this moment, Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu felt like giving up and retreating. They couldn't defeat Xiao. Whoosh! They leaped into the sky, unwilling to battle with Xiao any longer. Otherwise, their fate would definitely be death. They didn't want to suffer punishment, but they more so didn't want to die here. Thus, they decided to flee even if their secret would be revealed. They refused to fight to the death with Xiao. In any case, the closer they were to the ancient castler, the 2 stone statues, to be more exact, the more power they could draw on. As such, it was only natural that they make their way back up. Battling underground wouldn't help them a single bit. Ling Han waited for a moment before also sheathing his sword. He had already absorbed most of the essence of metal in this place. With a flash, he flew out of the cave. He arrived outside, only to see that Xiao was still engaged in an intense battle with Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua. Meanwhile, the people on the island were all gathered around to spectate. They were all stunned by this scene. Wasn't it said that with the protection of their deity, they would be invincible among those at the same cultivation level? However, there had first been Ling Han, and now there was another mysterious Ling Han. Right now, Xiao had the exact same appearance as Ling Han. What in the world was this? Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua were clearly struggling immensely, and this was a huge blow to the islanders' confidence. Xiao Jun immediately leaped over and asked, "Brother Ling, what's going on?" He was wearing a baleful expression as he glared at Ling Han. Right now, the person who was fighting with the island master and the island envoy looked exactly the same as Ling Han. Thus, who would believe that there was no relationship between them? "Are you questioning me?" Ling Han asked. "I am," Xiao Jun replied in a haughty voice. His battle prowess was indeed inferior to Ling Han's. Right now, however, there were around 10 8th Lotus elites in the surroundings. These elites were equivalent to Immortal Palace tier elites, so what did he need to fear? "Oh, I'm not sure what's going on," Ling Han said, shrugging. He completely denied any relationship with Xiao Gu. "Ling Han," Xiao Jun roared. "Ling Han, we also need an explanation," the visitors to the island said. Many of them wore expressions of displeasure. They had just defeated a beast tide, and they had just been enjoying the blessings of a deity. Yet, such a furious battle had suddenly erupted, and the assailant was more so identical in appearance to Ling Han. Thus, they were naturally filled with displeasure. "You're purposefully targeting us, right?" "Explanation?" Ling Han scoffed. "What right do you have to seek an explanation from me?" "You're going too far," the visitors to the island roared. "Lord Qin, this person is far too detestable. My lord, please capture him." Qinwei frowned slightly upon hearing this, and he said, "Ling Han, we're guests on this island right now. Since we're guests, it's best that we don't offend the hosts." Ling Han laughed and said, "What a bunch of fools. You're being toyed around with like monkeys, yet you don't even realize. I understand the feeling, the thirst, of wanting to obtain more power. However, can't you use your A*s to think for a moment? Are there truly such generous people in the world? Even if there are, do these people look like it to you?" Lan Ruaji immediately leaped forward and said, "Young Master Ling, enough with the nonsense. Perhaps you don't want me anymore?" Ling Han involuntarily shuddered. "Stop trying to disgust me." "You!" Lan Ruaji's slender body shuddered slightly, and her expression instantly changed. She thought extremely highly of herself, and she was convinced that she was as beautiful as a celestial maiden. In fact, all men should have been intoxicated by her beauty. Yet, Ling Han was actually treating her with such disdain. This was naturally a huge blow to her dignity, and it caused her to descend into wild fury. "Junior sister, it's best that you give up on him," Xiao Jun said with a cold chuckle. "His heart is filled with evil, and his actions are filled with suspicious intent. I suggest that we capture him and directly pluck his soul." "Enforcement officers, please capture this person," he said to the 8th Lotus elites. "I'll capture him," a middle-aged man said, and stepped forward. A lotus with 8 petals suddenly materialized between his brows. This was a unique symbol of their cultivation technique, one which was usually hidden. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Why don't you all come at me together? That way, I can save some time. You're but a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, yet you dare to speak to me with such audacity?" the middle-aged man said with a sneer. "To say nothing of receiving a blessing from the deity, even if he didn't, those at the 8th Lotus were still equivalent to Immortal Palace tier elites. As such, suppressing a dividing soul tier cultivator would be as easy as a flip of his hand." Ling Han started to accumulate power. With his strength, he naturally couldn't hope to rival an Immortal Palace tier elite. However, he still had an ultimate trump card. Thump, thump, thump. The middle-aged man strode over, with each of his steps giving off a deep and heavy thud that shook one's heart. He was threatening Ling Han, and he was placing pressure on Ling Han. "Brat, I truly don't understand. Where is your courage coming from?" the middle-aged man asked with a cold sneer. "You're about to find out," Ling Han said with a grin. There was a glimmer of danger in his eyes. His cracking light sphere had already finished charging. Boom! Arcs of lightning instantly exploded into the surroundings. The middle-aged man couldn't help but sneer in disdain. This attack was indeed powerful. However, it could at most only threaten a 7th Lotus Elite. To an 8th Lotus Elite like him, such an attack wouldn't pose any threat at all. The Elite activated a small portion of his defenses. Crack, crack, crack. Arcs of lighting gathered on his shield of black light, yet they were completely unable to penetrate it. This was completely expected. After all, it would be truly strange if a dividing soul tier cultivator could breach the defenses of an immortal palace elite. However, this was the cracking light sphere, and its target wasn't only the middle-aged man. Instead, this was an attack that didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and would attack everyone within its range. In fact, if Ling Han overcharged it, it might even cause damage to Ling Han himself. Thus, the arcs of violent lightning also shot toward the people in the surroundings. However, because these people were standing relatively far away, the lightning did little damage to them even if it struck them. These arcs of lightning possessed little power, so their damage could almost be completely ignored. However, was this truly the case? The middle-aged man wore a disdainful smile, and he was just about to step forward to kill Ling Han. Playtime is over, brat. You-huh. His expression changed drastically. His shield of black light was being rapidly corroded by the arcs of lightning. At the same time, screams of agony immediately sounded in the surroundings. Looking around, one could see that many people had already collapsed to the ground, with their bodies being rapidly corroded. What in the world was going on? Ling Han was only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, so how had he unleashed an attack that could even threaten an 8th Lotus Elite? The Elite was immediately plunged into a desperate situation. A vicious corrosive power was rapidly piercing through his defenses and yearning to destroy his body. At this moment, he had no option but to sit down and resist this attack with his full power. Ah! Screams of pain and misery echoed around the surroundings. However, these screams disappeared just as quickly as they had appeared. This was because the people struck by the arcs of lightning had already transformed into puddles of blood. Fuck! What the hell is this? To say nothing of others being petrified, even Ling Han was deeply astonished by the power of this attack. The red-spotted green bamboo was far too freakish. Indeed, his cracking light sphere had only been a decoy attack. In reality, he had used this attack to conceal and deliver the poison of the red-spotted green bamboo. This was poison that could even kill immortal palace tier elites. Thud, thud, thud. The remaining people hurriedly retreated. There was terror in their eyes, and as they looked at Ling Han, it was as if they were looking at a sinister demon. Chapter 2028, Blood Sacrifice. Chapter 2028, Blood Sacrifice. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I never go back on my words." Xiao Jun and the others couldn't help but shudder. This was because the 8th Lotus Elite started to wail in agony as Ling Han spoke. At the same time, his body was being corroded at a rate that was visible to the naked eye. If he had resolutely abandoned his physical body at the first instance, his divine sense could have still survived. At that time, he could have looked for a new body to possess. However, he hadn't fathomed the devastating nature of the red-spotted green bamboo, and he had dared to struggle against it with his own cultivation. His decision was an act of seeking death. In just a few seconds, a mighty immortal palace tier elite had already been reduced to nothing more than a puddle of blood. Both his physical body and divine sense were annihilated. Was this not petrifying? What in the world did you do? Xiao Jun asked in a trembling voice. He had always been a calm and composed person. Even after losing to Ling Han that time, he had immediately come up with a way to deal with the situation. He had admitted his loss and minimized the questioning of his authority. Now, however, he was completely shaken by the scene before him. He couldn't calm down no matter what. That was an 8th Lotus Elite. Yet, he had actually been killed by Ling Han in a single strike. This was simply inconceivable. Ling Han wore a wide smile, and he said, "You people have your deity, and I naturally have mine as well. Just then, I drew on the power of my deity. In comparison, the deity of you people is only as. In fact, I can instantly kill an elite one major tier above me. Sigh. He shook his head with an expression of utter disdain. Xiao Jun and the others were enraged upon hearing this. However, they couldn't say anything in retort. They couldn't argue against reality. Kill all of the outsiders. Begin a blood sacrifice. Lan Tianyu's voice suddenly traveled over. What? Everyone was shocked upon hearing this. The guests of the island were shocked because they hadn't imagined that the islanders would suddenly turn against them. After all, hadn't their relationship been cordial just a moment ago? They had fought a beast tied together, and they had even agreed to pray to the deity together. In the future, they would have become like family. Meanwhile, the residents of the island were also deeply astonished. Their island master was actually going to conduct a blood sacrifice. This was their final trump card. After conducting a blood sacrifice, the two deity statues would temporarily provide one with more impressive power. However, when this blessing expired, the blessed person would immediately suffer severe wounds. Thus, this was a final trump card. With them ordering a blood sacrifice, did this mean that Lan Tianyu and Che Yuanhua were also facing grave danger? Hurry up! What are you still standing around for? Lan Tianyu roared. He and Che Yuanhua were already on the verge of collapse. Xiao Gu was an undying freak, so if their battle continued, they would definitely be killed. Xiao Jun and the others were immediately shaken back to their senses. They then glared at the outsiders with baleful and murderous expressions. Blood sacrifice. Such a sacrificial offering naturally needed more than just fresh blood. It also needed life. In reality, vitality was the most essential ingredient of a blood sacrifice. The more vitality a blood sacrifice received, the more powerful the blood sacrifice would be. Die! Xiao Jun and the others roared as they charged at Qin Wei and the other outsiders. However, everyone avoided Ling Han as if in tacit understanding. They didn't dare to attack him. He had killed an 8th Lotus Elite with a single strike, and he had also killed a large number of other cultivators in the process. As such, who dared to attack him? In fact, they didn't even dare to approach him. They avoided him to the best of their ability. Ling Han involuntarily stroked his chin. Was he that frightening? Ah! The islanders launched a furious assault, and there were several 8th Lotus Elites among them. These elites were equivalent to Immortal Palace tier elites. Meanwhile, Qin Wei was the only Immortal Palace tier elite among the outsiders. That being the case, how could they resist the vicious attack of the islanders? Pu. Several people were immediately killed. They were violently beheaded, causing fountains of blood to spray into the sky. With each person they killed, the islanders would make a strange pose. It was as if they were praying, yet it was also as if they were dancing. This was a ritual of the blood sacrifice. Wang. The two stone statues suddenly underwent a peculiar change. Like a drought being ended by rain, they were instantly filled with renewed vitality. The blood sacrifice was working. Che Yuanhua's and Lan Tianyu's battle prowess instantly shot up by a noticeable amount. This allowed them to escape from the perilous situation and catch a breath. If they became even stronger, it was genuinely possible that they could turn the tables and suppress Xiao Gu instead. They naturally couldn't kill him, but they could at least subdue him and buy time for the islanders to retreat. Ling Han immediately frowned. He didn't want to let these people flee. He had to sabotage this blood sacrifice. Young Master Ling, save me. An outsider fought their way over, and they begged Ling Han to save them. Some islanders had been pursuing them, yet upon noticing Ling Han, they immediately stopped in their tracks. They were terrified of this demon. Ling Han glanced at the person before him, only to discover that this was the person who had sold him out before. He couldn't help but feel astonished. Just how shameless was this person? Whoosh! Upon seeing someone successfully escaping, many others also fought their way over. They treated Ling Han as a protective cover. These people, most of them had been loudly criticizing Ling Han just then. Moreover, after temporarily escaping, These people didn't even offer a word of thanks to Ling Han. In their eyes, they were all outsiders, so it was only natural that Ling Han offered a helping hand. No? Ling Han shook his head. These people were truly a bunch of trash. Their existence was a shame to this world. Since he couldn't let these people be killed for the blood sacrifice, he was willing to become a demon himself. Boom! Ling Han launched a punch, sending flames soaring into the sky. The person who had sold him out was instantly reduced to ashes. Fucking hell. Do you people think I'm a saint? You think I'll repay evil with good? Am I stupid? Ling Han, what are you doing? We've all come from the same place. You're completely inhumane. Young Master Ling, spare me. The outsiders all exclaimed in shock. Some were scolding Ling Han, while others were begging for their life. At the end of the day, they were all seeking to live. What a bunch of trash. You don't deserve to live in this world, Ling Han said with a cold expression. As he said this, his palm lashed out again. If these people had shown just a tiny bit more righteousness and courage while on the island, he wouldn't have minded drawing them into his spatial god tool. He would have offered a helping hand. Now, however, hurry up and die, trash. Please don't cause me any more trouble. The outsiders hurriedly started to flee. However, to their despair, they discovered that they were trapped between a tiger and a pack of wolves. Death was the only fate awaiting them. Ah! Wails of agony were incessant as the outsiders were killed one after another. Ling Han didn't feel a shred of sympathy. His heart of kindness had already been worn away by these people. Die! His heart was like steel as he unleashed the heaven-destroying 9 swords. Fusing this attack with his source power of metal, he was able to unleash an unfathomably devastating attack. Even an Earth Soul elite would be instantly killed if they were scraped by this attack. However, there were several 8th Lotus elites among the islanders, after all, so several outsiders were still killed and offered for sacrifice by them. Che Yuanhua's and Lan Tianyang's battle prowess instantly rose by an explosive amount. However, this still wasn't enough. Even after all of the outsiders had been killed, their battle prowess was still insufficient to suppress Xiao Gu. More. Sacrifice more. Lan Tianyu yelled in a shrill voice. Sacrifice more? Whom could they still kill? Ling Han was the only remaining outsider. To say nothing of whether they could kill him, even if they could, a single person wouldn't make much difference to the blood sacrifice. That being the case, whom did Lan Tianyu want them to kill? They could only kill their own members. Xiao Jun's expression became ice-cold, and he roared, "You heard, Island Master." Several 8th Lotus elites instantly lashed out, mercilessly killing those beside them. Pu, Pu. One after another, numerous heads flew into the sky, signifying the continuation of the blood sacrifice. Chapter 2029. All killed. Chapter 2029. All killed. Following Lan Tianyang's command for more sacrifices, 100 or so islanders were immediately killed. The surroundings became a sea of blood. The blood sacrifice resumed, and Che Yuanhua's and Lan Tianyang's battle prowess instantly soared again. They finally managed to suppress Xiao Gu. Earth-locking technique, they roared in unison. Wisps of black air flowed from their fingertips, transforming into lengths of thread that wrapped around Xiao Gu and preventing him from moving freely. It didn't matter that they couldn't kill him. As long as they could capture him, they could take him away and bring him before more powerful elites. At that time, they would be able to thoroughly exterminate this great threat. Xiao Gu fought and struggled, yet he was unable to break free. There's also this brat, Lan Tianyang said as he turned around. He glared at Ling Han. They had to capture Ling Han and bring him back to their sect as well. After all, he possessed a source power of heaven and earth, and this was something that their sect master had specifically asked them to obtain. I'll capture him, Che Yuanhua said as he strode toward Ling Han. He was a 9th Lotus elite, which was equivalent to being an ascending origin tier elite. With a single thought, he could kill Ling Han several times over. Ling Han smiled and said, I suggest you look after yourselves first. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu turned around to look at Xiao Gu, only to see a wisp of light shining within him. This light then transformed into a dazzling symbol. Whoosh! The symbol flew out from Xiao Gu's body, instantly obliterating the black threads around him with an overwhelming force. Xiao Gu regained his freedom. Yaya! He was enraged, and he launched a flurry of vicious attacks at Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu again. This time, he more so retrieved a bone from his body. This bone was his true body, and there was a celestial king tier symbol dazzling atop it. This bone could be viewed as a celestial tool, one which possessed a devastating might. With a single attack, it could shatter heaven and earth. Rumble. One after another, numerous celestial bodies started to rain down from the sky. These were meteors that were as large as mountains. How could Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu block this? They weren't struck, yet just the shock waves emitted by these meteors caused them to cough blood as they retreated in disarray. They couldn't block this power at all. Xiao Gu was unleashing a divine might, and this was a completely unstoppable force. Retreat. Hurry up and retreat. Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu immediately turned around to retreat without regard for anything else. Right now, they were facing the full might of a celestial tool. How could they hope to rival it? However, they were still too slow. Xiao Gu wielded that bone, which was dazzling with celestial light. Boom! In just a short moment, one of Che Yuanhua's arms was severed by the celestial light. Meanwhile, Lan Tianyu had already lost a leg. They appeared as miserable as could be. However, to these two elites, such wounds were completely acceptable. As long as they managed to flee, they could still regenerate their severed arms and legs. It was a pity that Xiao Gu wouldn't give them such a chance. He was unstoppable as he swung his celestial king bone. Ling Han also didn't rest, and he started to launch a flurry of vicious attacks at Xiao Jun and the others. He had to complete his job of exterminating evil. Ah! The agonized wails of Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu were incessant. The power of a celestial king had already been unleashed, so how could they measly ninth Lotus elites hope to block it? Death was their only fate. Xiao Gu was filled with vicious rage, and after killing Che Yuanhua and Lan Tianyu, he immediately turned his attention to the other islanders. This was a one-sided massacre, and with a flash of celestial light, all of the islanders were immediately killed. Only 3 people remained alive: Ling Han, Xiao Gu, and Qin Wei. Qin Wei was still alive, and this was because he was an immortal palace tier elite, meaning that he had been able to block the attacks of the 8th Lotus elites. Moreover, he was a normal person, so he hadn't been targeted by Xiao Gu. Otherwise, if he had participated in that ceremony and offered his soul to the deity, he would have definitely been killed by Xiao Gu at this moment. In any case, Qin Wei's expression was extremely grim at this moment. His eyes were filled with terror as he looked at Xiao Gu. "Xiao Gu, long time no see," Ling Han said with a loud laugh. "Yaya." Xiao Gu's vicious aura instantly vanished, and he flashed an innocent smile at Ling Han. "Xiao Gu, long time no see." "Fine. He's being a parrot again." Ling Han shook his head and asked, "Xiao Gu, how did you come to the celestial realm?" "Xiao Gu, how did you come to the celestial realm?" Xiao Gu repeated. "Holy, how long has it been? You still haven't learned to talk yet? How has your strength grown so rapidly?" Ling Han asked. He wasn't willing to give up. "How has your strength grown so rapidly?" "Sigh." Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. Xiao Gu also sighed in reply. "Sigh." Ling Han pondered for a moment, and he decided that it was only normal that Xiao Gu had come to the celestial realm. After reaching a certain level of strength, he could naturally shatter the gates to the celestial realm. However, the rapid growth of his power was still far too astonishing. Thinking about it carefully, however, Xiao Gu wasn't a human, and he was only a bone. Thus, he naturally didn't face any barriers in advancing cultivation level. Ling Han pushed these thoughts from his mind. "Xiao Gu, oh Xiao Gu, how can I communicate with you?" Ling Han really wanted to know what Xiao Gu had experienced during his lifetime. He had definitely been a celestial king, So how had he died? Moreover, he still detested these cultivators of the other system with such passion after dying. Just what had he experienced before? It was a shame that Xiao only knew how to say Yaya, or be a parrot. He couldn't express his own thoughts at all. Should he wait for Lu Herong? Ling Han removed the formation over the island. This way, Lu Herong wouldn't miss it when she passed by. However, perhaps Lu Herong had already examined this region before. With her confidence as a celestial king, she naturally wouldn't examine the region a second time. In any case, Ling Han would wait for now. At this moment, he was extremely interested in the two stone statues. Pa. However, Ling Han's eyes immediately widened in astonishment. This was because Xiao didn't give him any chance to investigate the two statues. Upon seeing them, he immediately lashed out to destroy them. Yaya. Xiao was extremely proud, and as he looked at Ling Han, it was as if he were asking for praise. Holy crap! Right now, Ling Han only had himself to blame. He hadn't told Xiao beforehand, and he should have known that Xiao had an immense dislike for evil. There was nothing he could do about this. It was time to leave the island. Ling Han chopped wood to make a boat, and Qinwei was also doing the same thing. However, he didn't dare to approach Ling Han and Xiao. Instead, he hid far away, and he worked hard by himself. Meanwhile, Ling Han also let the Empress and the others out from the Black Tower. The Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had both seen Xiao before, so they weren't surprised by his presence. However, Hunyou and Bewitching Maiden Ro were both astonished upon seeing him. Shi Lei and Shi Yu more so started to exclaim in surprise, shouting about how they had two stepfathers. Huh? Why do you look the same as Niu's Ling Han? Hunyou asked as she looked Xiao up and down. Huh? Why do you look the same as Niu's Ling Han? Xiao instantly became excited upon seeing so many new people. Why are you so strange? Not only are you copying someone else's appearance, but you're even copying other people's words. Why are you? So fun. So fun. There was a glimmer in Hunyou's eyes, and it was clear that she was enjoying playing around with Xiao. Even though Ling Han wasn't a skilled craftsman, he still managed to construct a boat after a day of work. This boat was only around 3 meters long, and it was only around 1 meter wide. In any case, it only needed to hold 1 or 2 people. After all, there was still the Black Tower. Ling Han and Xiao boarded the boat. Meanwhile, the others returned inside the Black Tower. Even though the boat was small, it had been constructed from trees that grew in the boundless seas. Thus, it could easily block the sea waves, and there was no danger of it capsizing. Moreover, with Xiao as a guard, their safety was also not a problem. Even if they encountered Sea King-class creatures, Xiao could still scare them away by activating his celestial bone. 17 years later, the small boat successfully reached the seashore. Chapter 2030. Reaching the Western Celestial Realm. Chapter 2030. Reaching the Western Celestial Realm. They had arrived at the Western Celestial Realm. Ling Han immediately felt the difference of this place. Compared to the Eastern Celestial Realm, the spiritual chi here was far more concentrated. Because of this, the spiritual herbs and celestial medicines in the Western Celestial Realm were of higher quality and more abundant than those in the Eastern Celestial Realm. It was no wonder that the overall level of cultivation in the Western Celestial Realm was superior. Their environment was already better. Ling Han turned to Hunyou and asked, Niu, where's the Rock Palace? Huh? Hunyou blinked and replied, the Rock Palace is naturally where the Rock Palace is. Ling Han grimaced and asked, so you don't know where your home is? Niu doesn't need to know, Hunyou said. However, this was indeed expected. With this glutton's personality, how could she care about her surroundings? She would be satisfied as long as she could eat and play. Fine. There's clearly a member of the Rock Palace here, yet we have absolutely no clue about where the Rock Palace is located. Then we can only ask someone. They disembarked from the ship and continued to journey forward. A lush forest appeared before them, and their eyes lit up upon seeing it. Gazing at the unchanging sea had been far too boring. Now that they could see some greenery, they naturally felt completely refreshed. Let's look for the nearest city. We can then ask around and find the way to the Rock Palace. They set off in some direction, and they were convinced that they would eventually come across a city. 7 days later. Rumble. The earth suddenly started to quake, and it was as if there were an earthquake. Ling Han looked over, only to see a wave rushing toward them. No, this wasn't a wave. Instead, it was an army. They were either marching forward or in the process of fleeing. In any case, they were lightning quick, and there were mountain-like elephants charging alongside them. There were also rocks with a wingspan of several thousand meters soaring through the sky, and there were many armored warriors wielding their spears as they danced in the air. There were numerous elites among them, and they were all radiating with extremely terrifying auras. With so many of them together, their advance naturally caused the earth to quake. It was as if heaven and earth were about to collapse. This was a fleeing army. Ling Han determined this after observing them for a brief moment. After all, ordinary armies wouldn't abandon their armor and weapons. Moreover, they wouldn't be carrying such a large number of wounded warriors, and their morale wouldn't be so low. There was a flag among them, and Ling Han saw the moon-shaped symbol on this flag. This flag was being held by a golden giant that measured 30 meters in height. The army quickly arrived before them before hurriedly soaring over their heads. Of course, there were also many warhorses that sprinted past them. In fact, several of them almost crashed into Ling Han and the others. "You guys, hurry up and turn around," some passing soldiers said. "Be careful not to lose your life." What do they mean? A thought suddenly occurred to Ling Han, and he shouted, "Fuck, they're still being pursued." "Haha, since you know, hurry up and flee," a soldier said with a loud laugh. Ling Han was exasperated, and he could only say, "Follow me." He didn't want to use the Black Tower before so many people. Moreover, he didn't want to rely on the Black Tower every time he came across some danger. Ling Han and the others also turned around to flee. However, because they had reacted too slowly, they were now stuck at the very back of the fleeing army. Glancing back, they could see another wave surging over from the distance. That was also a huge army, and they were carrying another flag with them. This flag was decorated with the word "Do." Sure enough, one army was fleeing, while the other army was pursuing. Fuck, why do I always come across these situations? Ling Han sprinted as fast as he could, and the Empress and the others all followed behind him. They all felt extremely frustrated. Only Hunyo was giggling, finding this situation extremely interesting. Meanwhile, Xiao wore a naive and adorable expression. As long as there was no enemy, he would be in this indifferent state. One army was fleeing, while another army was pursuing. A battle had clearly been fought just then, and the army with the moon flag had been defeated. Thus, they were fleeing. Behind them, the victorious army was relentlessly giving chase. This pursuit lasted for a whopping 15 days, at which time the pursuing army finally stopped and gave up on the chase. The fleeing army finally managed to catch a breath, no longer needing to advance in such disarray. During these 15 days, Ling Han also became quite familiar with these people. This army belonged to the moon-plucking Celestial King, and it was referred to as the moon-plucking army. Of course, this was only one of the many armies under the flag of the moon-plucking army. Meanwhile, their opponent had been the Refined Cloud Army, which belonged to the Refined Cloud Celestial King. These two Celestial Kings controlled neighboring territories, so it wasn't unusual for large-scale battles to break out between them. War naturally ended with victors and losers. This time, the moon-plucking Celestial King had suffered a small loss. Of course, neither the moon-plucking Celestial King nor the Refined Cloud Celestial King had participated in this battle. The two armies were simply led by the generals under them. During this time, Ling Han had also asked around for the Rock Palace's whereabouts. However, even though these people had heard of the Rock Palace, they weren't sure about where exactly it was located. The Eastern Celestial Realm was large, yet the Western Celestial Realm was even larger. The Eastern Celestial Realm possessed 33 heavens, while the Western Celestial Realm possessed 99 heavens. It was 3 times larger. For ordinary people, It would already be extremely impressive if they had traveled to the nearby 3 or 4 heavens before. Thus, if the rock palace were located 6 or 7 heavens away, it was indeed very difficult for these people to know where it was located. Perhaps the moon-plucking celestial king would know. However, could Ling Han ask the moon-plucking celestial king about such trivial matters? In fact, he wouldn't even be able to meet the celestial king. Ling Han felt extremely annoyed. They had clearly arrived at the western celestial realm already, yet he felt like he had become a fool. He had no clue where to go next. Since that's the case, let's follow this army first, the Empress suggested. This was their only option. They would settle here first, and then they would make a plan for the future. This army was fairly friendly, and they didn't shoo Ling Han and the others away. They allowed them to travel together. 7 days later, the army finally arrived at their encampment. Ling Han and the others weren't allowed to enter, so they could only separate ways here. The soldiers gave them some guidance, and after walking north for around 3 days, a large city eventually appeared before them. We don't know where the Rock Palace is, but what about the Alchemy Holy Land or whatnot? Ling Han stroked his chin in thought. He should have come to the Western Celestial Realm with Ma Tongguang 1,000 years ago. However, Ma Tongguang had been killed, and he had thus lost his guide. At that time, he had also been lazy, so he hadn't studied much about the Western Celestial Realm. I remember Master calling that place the Universal Peace Heaven, or something. Although the time has long passed, as the representative of the Eastern Celestial Realm, I should still go even if I'm late. Fine, then our first stop will be the Universal Peace Heaven. Moreover, alchemists are involved in business with customers from all places, so it's extremely likely that they know the whereabouts of the Rock Palace. We'll rest for a while, and then immediately set off. Ling Han made a decision, and the others naturally wouldn't oppose it. They decided to rest in this city for a few days, where they would also replenish their food supply and other necessities. They would then set off for the Universal Peace Heaven. The Western Celestial Realm had many local specialties, and spiritual herbs were one of these. Many spiritual herbs that were rare in the Eastern Celestial Realm were common goods here, and they were more so as cheap as dirt. It was no wonder that so many merchants were willing to travel tens of thousands of kilometers to this place, even if the journey was filled with perilous dangers. The potential profit was far too astonishing. Ling Han also purchased many goods. Even though spiritual herbs couldn't help with one's comprehension, they could help one accumulate origin power. This was always helpful. Help! Help! Evil tyrants are trying to kidnap a woman. A woman shouted in a shrill voice. She ran over from the distance, and there were a dozen or so men chasing after her. They were all wearing sinister expressions. Chapter 2031, Fu Clan. Chapter 2031, Fu Clan. A weak and helpless woman was being pursued by 10 powerful brutes. Wasn't this a typical case of kidnapping? Although the woman didn't appear too weak, with a 4th severance cultivation, the brutes chasing after her were all at the 3rd severance or 4th severance as well. As such, how could she hope to defeat them? Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his mind. As expected of the Western Celestial Realm, even severing mundane tier cultivators are so commonplace. Anyhow, that woman was indeed beautiful, with her skin pale like jade and her hair raven black. Her figure was also extremely shapely and alluring. As such, it wouldn't have been surprising if she had caught the attention of some evil young master, who had then commanded his underlings to kidnap her. The woman continued to scream as she ran, yet the louder she screamed, the quicker the people in the surroundings tried to avoid her. They appeared extremely afraid to be caught up in her trouble. After everyone retreated to the sides of the streets, Ling Han and his companions stuck out like a sore thumb. A hint of panic spread across the woman's face. She didn't know the intention of Ling Han and the others. Were they going to help her, or were they going to assist her kidnappers? She was running extremely quickly, and she sped past Ling Han and the others in a flash. Her expression immediately relaxed, and she continued to speed away into the distance. When the dozen or so brutes approached, a faint smile spread across Ling Han's face. He activated his regulation of slaughter. Wong! A terrifying aura exploded outward, causing the color to drain from the brutes' faces. They collapsed to the ground with several loud thuds. Was it possible for severing mundane tier cultivators to fall over for no reason? Naturally not. Moreover, it was a dozen or so of them falling over in unison. It was extremely evident that this was the doing of Ling Han and the others. Otherwise, why would they be standing in the middle of the road? Heavens! They actually dare to interfere with young Master Fu's affairs. They're definitely going to suffer great misfortune. Seriously, don't they know that the Fu clan is a powerful clan of United Link City? By the looks of it, they're all newcomers. That's definitely the case. The passers-by murmured among themselves, and they were all discussing this in a hushed tone. It was as if they were afraid of being overheard. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. No wonder these dogs were all at the severing mundane tier. If it weren't a powerful clan, how could they deploy so many powerful cultivators? However, he naturally wouldn't worry about this. To say nothing of the impressive battle prowess of himself and the others, wasn't there Xiao Gu to protect them even if they truly provoked a powerful elite? Let's go, let's go. Niu wants to eat meat. Niu said in displeasure. She patted her stomach as she spoke. Let's go, let's go. Niu wants to eat meat. Xiao Gu repeated. He also started to pat his stomach. Ling Han could feel the beginning of a headache. Just Niu alone was already enough trouble. Now, there was going to be another troublemaker. In any case, he naturally couldn't turn down Niu's request. Thus, they started to look for a place to eat. They chit-chat as they walked, and it was almost as if they had already forgotten about the small commotion just then. The passers-by exchanged surprised glances with each other. These people are far too confident. Indeed, they interfered with the Fu clan's matters, yet they still dare to act so calm and composed? Perhaps they came prepared? Tisk, haven't you heard of the saying? Even a powerful dragon can't defeat a snake in its nest. Don't they know that the Grand Elder of the Fu clan is the chief alchemist of the moon-plucking Celestial King? In any case, they're definitely seeking death. Ling Han and the others didn't hear these remarks. This was because they had already found a restaurant and started to chomp down on food. Delicious, delicious. Niu had a drumstick in one hand and braised pork in another. Her mouth was also stuffed with food, yet she could still somehow manage to speak clearly. This was truly impressive. Xiao Gu tried to emulate her, yet his words came out completely scrambled. He couldn't speak clearly at all. It was clear that gluttons also needed talent. Ling Han, the Empress, and the others ordered some wine to drink. There were many aspects where the Western Celestial Realm was different from the Eastern Celestial Realm, and this also included the food culture. Thus, they all wanted to try some wine. You people seem to be in quite a good mood, someone said with a leisurely laugh. Ling Han and the others looked over, only to see someone at the door. However, because the light was coming from behind him, a long shadow was cast onto the floor. This also made him appear slightly more dignified. This was a smart-looking young man. He was wearing an azure robe, and his eyebrows were slightly raised, making him appear quite flamboyant. Young Master Fu. The customers in the restaurant immediately stood up and greeted him. Their voices were all filled with respect. The Fu clan was a formidable force in United Link City. This person was called Fu Yu, and he was the only third-generation member of the Fu clan. Thus, one could imagine just how lofty his status was. This was inevitable. The past 3 generations of the Fu clan all consisted of only a single person. Fu Yu wore a faint smile as he strode into the restaurant. He arrived beside Ling Han's table, and there was a skinny old man following behind him. This old man appeared tired and listless, and his eyes were shut the entire time. However, whenever he opened them, one could see the countless intertwining symbols on his eyeballs. His domineering aura would flash into the surroundings for a split second. Immortal Palace Tier? Ling Han speculated in his mind. This old man's power was profound and hard to fathom. He was so powerful that even Ling Han couldn't determine his power. Thus, he was at least at the Immortal Palace Tier. However, could he be an ascending origin tier elite? Ling Han truly didn't believe this. Would such an elite become the subordinate of a young man? After all, the Fu clan wasn't a celestial king tier force. You don't mind me sitting over here, do you? Fu Yu asked with a smile. However, he had already taken a seat before Ling Han and the others could even reply. Why the fuck did you ask? You don't mind me sitting over here, do you? Xiao Gu repeated. He was filled with excitement upon seeing this new toy. A look of displeasure instantly spread across Fu Yu's face. What was the meaning of this? Was this person mocking him? He humphed and said, Friend, don't think I don't know that it was you who attacked my useless subordinates. Friend, don't think I don't know, Xiao Gu repeated without missing a word. Moreover, his skills had clearly improved, and he could even emulate one's tone and expression now. Fu Yu truly became angry at this moment. These people were taking things too far. Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly astonished. Wasn't the Fu clan a formidable force? How did this young Master Fu have so much spare time? He had failed to kidnap a woman, so he was personally coming over now? Was he truly that given to lust? However, this didn't seem right. Whether or not one was given to lust, this could be easily determined through their actions. Right now, Hun Yo, the Empress, and bewitching Maiden Ro were all sitting at the table. They were three breathtaking beauties. However, Fu Yu could still remain undistracted. Indeed, he might steal a few glances here and there, but this was a completely normal reaction. Bam! Fu Yu slammed his hand on the table. His patience certainly wasn't great. However, this was understandable. As a respected youth, who wouldn't be afraid of him and yield to him? Moreover, he didn't know about Xiao Gu's habit of parroting others, so he thought that Xiao Gu was purposefully mocking him. As such, he naturally couldn't control his temper. Heh, don't mind him. He simply likes to copy others, Ling Han said with a smile. Heh, don't mind him, Xiao Gu repeated. He still liked to copy Ling Han the most. After all, this was the first person that he had met. Indeed, even his appearance was copying Ling Han's. Upon seeing this, Fu Yu's anger finally subsided a little. This person seemed to have some mental issues. Strange. One of the brothers is handsome and confident, yet the other one is stupid and slow. Was he beaten stupid in his mother's stomach? I'll also cut to the chase. Where's that woman? Fu Yu asked. Chapter 2032, Wild Imagination. Chapter 2032, Wild Imagination. That woman? Oh, the woman who was being pursued by the group of brutes. This was truly a loyal person. Was he unable to forget that woman? Ling Han shook his head and replied, I don't know what you're talking about. Friend, are you trying to deny that you attacked my subordinates just then? Fu Yu asked with a humph. A look of evident displeasure spread across his face. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, That can't be considered as attacking. If I truly attacked them, which of them would have survived? This was the truth. Those brutes were merely at the severing mundane tier. So with Ling Han's power as a dividing soul tier cultivator, he could have easily killed them with a single thought. Would you have dared to? Fu Yu asked. The Fu clan was a formidable force in United Link City. The Grand Elder of the Fu clan was more so the chief alchemist of the moon-plucking celestial king. So who dared to provoke the Fu clan? I won't speak any nonsense with you. Hand that woman over. Otherwise, suffer the consequences. Fu Yu's tone was extremely tough. Ling Han laughed and said, Sorry, but I don't know about any woman or any man or whatever. I suggest you ask someone else. How dare you? Fu Yu roared in rage. He reached over to grab at Ling Han. Wang. Numerous symbols materialized on his hand. Golden light dazzled, and he appeared much like a divine being. Ling Han was slightly astonished. He had truly underestimated this person. Fu Yu actually possessed an Earth Soul battle prowess. Moreover, his cultivation level was only at the Yin Soul. Yet he was actually able to wield the battle prowess of an Earth Soul cultivator. He possessed the might of an Emperor tier. Ling Han reached over to grab Fu Yu's wrist. How audacious! Fu Yu said with a cold humph. Was this person retarded? They were both at the dividing soul tier, so they could only have a rough gauge of each other's major tier. In terms of minor level, They weren't able to determine this with any confidence. Only those who were sensitive enough could determine whether one's aura was stronger or weaker than their own. If they engaged in a fight, however, they would naturally be able to determine each other's cultivation level with ease. One of them was at the Yin soul, and the other was at the Yang soul. There was only one minor level between them. Moreover, Fuyu was also an emperor tier, so he could rival those one minor level above him and still be invincible. In other words, he could crush those at the Earth soul. As such, how could Ling Han rival him? You're not trying to dodge, and you're even trying to grab my wrist instead. Just how audacious are you? Pa! There was a crisp crack as Fuyu's wrist was grabbed by Ling Han. Ling Han's grip was extremely solid. What? Fuyu was shocked, and his eyes were instantly filled with disbelief. Even the elder behind him suddenly opened his piercing eyes. It was as if celestial bodies were forming and collapsing, and this was an overwhelming aura that caused almost everyone in the restaurant to groan in pain. In fact, some people even started to cough blood. This was an immortal palace tier elite. Just his aura alone was already enough to severely wound severing mundane tier cultivators. Fortunately, Xiao reached over to protect the Empress and the others. He had clearly blocked the attack of an immortal palace tier elite with ease, yet his expression was still dazed, and he appeared especially muddle-headed and adorable. Fuck! The elder's eyes widened in astonishment. Just then, he had thought that Xiao was nothing more than a fool. However, this fool had actually reached the immortal palace tier. No, he had at least reached the immortal palace tier. The elder conceded that he couldn't determine Xiao cultivation level. It was unfathomably profound. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Young people need to show respect. It's not good to throw punches. We need to convince other people with reason." The Empress, bewitching Maiden Ro, and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden all smiled upon hearing this. Their husband always liked to pummel people for the smallest of conflicts. Yet, he was now encouraging someone else to convince people with reason? Wasn't this a joke? Only Nyo chimed in with a serious expression, saying, "Nyo also likes to convince people with reason. Brat, let's compete in eating. If you can't eat as much as Nyo, then crawl on the ground like a dog." Fuyu felt like his view of the world was collapsing. A Yang soul cultivator had managed to easily grab his wrist, and he couldn't break free from his grasp no matter what. Not only that, but his foolish brother had even managed to block the attack of his guardian. How was this group so powerful? Perhaps this was all part of an elaborate conspiracy? Perhaps their aim was to draw him out and then capture him so that they could demand a ransom from the Fu clan. What audacity! They were subordinates of the moon-plucking celestial king, and his grandfather was more so the chief alchemist. In fact, he could be viewed as a favored subordinate of the celestial king. To target the Fu clan, wasn't this equivalent to provoking the moon-plucking celestial king? What in the world do you people want? The more danger he was in, the more composed Fuyu became. He possessed the demeanor of an emperor tier. Ling Han was slightly surprised, and he said, "You targeted me first, yet you're asking me what I want? Aren't you twisting the facts a little?" Enough with the nonsense. You're after a ransom, aren't you? Fuyu said. Fuyu cut Ling Han off and immediately said, 100 million star stones. That's enough, right? This is the final offer. Otherwise, the deal is off, Fuyu said in a resolute voice. Ling Han was rendered speechless. He had never even thought about becoming a kidnapper. Moreover, even though he had grabbed Fuyu's wrist, had that not been an act of self-defense? Why had the situation suddenly elevated to one of kidnapping and ransom? Moreover, it had taken this twist in such a smooth fashion. Upon seeing Ling Han's silence, Fuyu took it as a sign of agreement. He turned to the elder and said, "Uncle Yu, can you please go and bring 100 million star stones over?" "Young master, then what about your safety?" the elder asked in concern. His task was to protect Fuyu, yet not only had he failed, but he even had to temporarily leave. What if the other party didn't honor the deal? Rest assured, I'm confident that these people aren't fools. They understand that I'm only valuable if I'm alive, Fu said in a composed voice. He appeared extremely calm and relaxed. Understood, the elder replied. Without any more hesitation, he turned around to leave. Please wait for a moment. 100 million star stones will take some time to gather, Fu said. His expression was as if he were in control, even though he had fallen into their hands. Ling Han and the others exchanged confused glances, and they could all see the thought in each other's eyes. This dumb, see asterisk and T. Sigh. Ling Han loosened his grip and said, Say, is your imagination a bit wild? Fu rubbed his sore wrist and said, Friend, you've already gained the upper hand, so is there any need to mock me? He naturally wouldn't think Ling Han was letting him go. Instead, Ling Han and the others were brimming with confidence. Even if they didn't restrict him, he still wouldn't be able to flee. Ling Han patted Fu's shoulder and said, You're definitely the most imaginative person that I've come across. Fu naturally thought that Ling Han was teasing him, so he simply replied with a cold humph. Ling Han shook his head and said, What if I told you that I don't know that woman at all? Would you believe me? You don't believe me, huh? However, this is indeed the truth. I was simply displeased with seeing so many brutes chasing a weak woman. Just then, you were also the one who attacked me first, so I was merely acting in self-defense. However, your imagination took flight, and you thought that I was kidnapping you for a ransom? Ha 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 ha. Fu didn't believe Ling Han at first. Fuck, do you think I'm stupid? He humphed and said, Then I'm going to leave now. You won't stop me, will you? Please, Ling Han said as he pointed at the door. Fu was extremely suspicious as he walked over. Upon seeing that Ling Han and the others weren't attempting to stop him, he turned around and said, I'm really going to leave now. Please. Chapter 2033, Searching for the Culprit. Chapter 2033, Searching for the Culprit. Fu walked out of the restaurant. However, after a brief moment, he stuck his head back in, saying, I'm really going to leave. Ling Han nodded in reply, gesturing for him to do as he pleased. Fu walked out of the restaurant again. However, after a short moment, he surprisingly entered again, walking over and sitting next to Ling Han. This was genuinely a misunderstanding, he asked in puzzlement. Ling Han and the others replied with a nod. Even though this person was an emperor tier, he was more so a clown. Fu could barely believe that he had caused such a ruckus over nothing. However, he had indeed been able to leave freely just then. This was proof that Ling Han and the others hadn't been lying to him. Fuck, he had truly become a clown. His face flushed red as he sighed with embarrassment. After a long while, he said, I might have misunderstood you guys, but this isn't without reason. He paused for a moment before continuing. In fact, you guys also misunderstood me. I'm not someone who abuses my power to harass others. I've gathered so, Ling Han said with a nod. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated Fu with such politeness. There were far too many sinister tyrants and perverts in the world, and Ling Han wouldn't mind punishing them if he came across them. If Fu had truly been such a person, he would have already been a corpse now. That woman pretended to be a maid to enter my clan, yet she stole the undying pill that my grandfather had just finished refining. This was discovered by the other servants, and this was what led to me pursuing her. I immediately gave chase after receiving the news, but it was already too late, Fu said. Huh, so this is how it was? Is that so? Ling Han asked with a frown. If this were true, then he had truly committed evil with good intentions. Not a word is false. I swear on the reputation of the Fu clan, Fu said with a solemn expression. Ling Han nodded and said, Then this was truly all a big misunderstanding. They had misunderstood why the members of the Fu clan had been pursuing the woman. Meanwhile, Fu had mistakenly thought that Ling Han and the others were trying to kidnap him for a ransom. Ling Han immediately stood up and said, Then let's look for her. This is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Where do we even start? Fu said with a sigh. The population of United Link City numbered in the tens of billions, and this city was more so astoundingly large. Trying to find a specific person was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Nyo will look for her. Hunyo volunteered. Fuyu didn't feel any confidence at all. This was someone who had challenged someone else to an eating contest. What could she possibly achieve? However, Linghan chuckled and said, "Nyo, lead the way." Hum. Hunyo immediately stood up to leave. However, after taking a few steps, she hurriedly ran back to package all of the leftover food. Only then did she stride away. Fuyu instantly felt even less confident. He couldn't help but shake his head. "Let's go," Linghan said as he grabbed Fuyu. With his strength, Fuyu naturally couldn't resist him. They left the restaurant and returned to where they had first encountered the woman. Hunyo wrinkled her nose and started to sniff the surroundings. After a while, she pointed at some road and said, "Over there." "Fuck, do you have a dog nose?" Fuyu couldn't help but diss in his mind. However, he naturally didn't dare to say this out aloud. Moreover, Hunyo was so breathtakingly beautiful, so he definitely couldn't bring himself to say this. Meanwhile, Linghan and the others were filled with confidence in Hunyo's abilities. Her nose was even more powerful than that of a dog. They continued to follow Hunyo, who would stop from time to time before taking twists and turns, and even ascending and descending mountains. After 2 entire days, they finally arrived at a small village. There was smoke rising from chimneys, and there were dogs barking in joy. This was true countryside scenery. Hunyo pointed at the village and said, "Right here." "Here?" Fuyu naturally didn't believe her. He shook his head in doubt. "Let's go," Linghan said as he dragged Fuyu along. They entered the village, and they were immediately surrounded by a group of children whose eyes were completely drawn to the Empress and Hunyo. They had never seen such beautiful people before. These women were completely like celestial maidens. Linghan and the others stopped before an extremely ordinary-looking house. "Here?" Fuyu asked. He couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment. He had heard from his subordinates that the woman was at the severing mundane tier. Even though severing mundane tier cultivators couldn't be regarded as elites in the celestial realm, they were still definitely respectable beings. In some small cities, they could even assemble their own forces and become a powerful ruler. As such, would they hold themselves up in such a rural place? Who would believe this? However, Linghan turned to the children and asked, "Do any of you know who lives here? The first one to answer will get 2 pieces of candy." He immediately retrieved 2 pieces of candy. I know. I also know." The children fought to answer his question. In fact, even Hunyo felt extremely tempted. After all, this candy had initially been prepared to tempt her. "A big brother and a big sister live here. The big sister is very beautiful. However, she's not as beautiful as these big sisters. They've only lived here for 2 years. The big brother got sick, and he's always coughing. In fact, I've even seen him cough blood." Linghan smiled and took out some more candy to hand to the children. He then said, "All right, go and play now." The children immediately ran off. Linghan pushed open the bamboo gate in front of the house, revealing a dainty path that was decorated with beautiful flowers on either side. This was in stark contrast to the simplicity of the rest of the village. Meanwhile, the door to the house was only slightly shut, and Linghan immediately heard coughing before he had even pushed it open. With a slight push, he opened the door, revealing extremely ordinary furniture. There was only a single table, wardrobe, and bed. Lying on the bed was a man who was violently coughing. In fact, he was spitting blood as he coughed, and it was as if he were about to cough his internal organs out. "Cough. Who are you?" the man asked when he saw Linghan. He raised his head with much difficulty, and Linghan saw that he was a fairly handsome man. However, his face was far too pale, and there wasn't a single hint of color. Fuyu suddenly wrinkled his nose and exclaimed, There's the scent of the undying pill." He immediately jumped forward and said, "You ingested the undying pill." The man was shocked, and he hurriedly shook his head, saying, "I didn't eat any undying pill. You people have got it wrong. I don't know what you're talking about." Fu Yu's feeling of doubt vanished into thin air. Hunyo had indeed found the right place. Moreover, the undying pill had already been ingested by this man. He was filled with scorching rage. His grandfather had refined the undying pill at the command of the moon-plucking celestial king. Yet, it had been ingested by this person now? How would they explain this to the moon-plucking celestial king? "Don't worry, we don't have any evil intentions," Ling Han said with a smile. He placed a hand on the man before activating his source power of wood. A power that was brimming with vitality instantly surged into the man's body, causing his fit of coughing to immediately cease. In fact, a hint of healthy red returned to his pale face. "You've been wounded by someone," Ling Han said. "That person most likely had the ability to kill you, yet they only left you with severe wounds. Such sinister intentions. They wanted to torture you to death." The man's expression changed again and again. In the end, he could only heave a long sigh and say, "You're right. That's indeed the case." "Tell us about it," Ling Han said in interest. He had initially thought that the woman had stolen the undying pills to sell or exchange for other benefits. By the looks of it, however, that definitely wasn't the case. "There were 10 undying pills in total. You definitely haven't ingested all of them, so where are the rest of them?" Fuyu cut in. "Oi, do you know how to speak? Can't you see that he's sick?" Ling Han said as he picked Fuyu up and tossed him aside. He turned back to the man and said, "All right, you can tell us now. Take it slow." Fuyu couldn't help but feel vexed. He was the grandson of a 4-star alchemist. Was it really necessary for Ling Han to treat him like this? Chapter 2034, Story. Chapter 2034, Story. "My name is Guang, the man said, starting to recount his story. "I was born into an ordinary family, but my cultivation talent was fairly decent. Thus, I joined the Star Moon sect to cultivate. In a chance of fate, I met a person. She was Lu Xueyin, my current wife. Xueyin was the granddaughter of the third elder of the Star Moon sect, so her status was far superior to that of me, a measly outer disciple. Initially, I thought that I didn't stand a chance with Xueyin. However, who can predict fate? Yet, when Xueyin and I fell in love, we were immediately faced with strong opposition. Not only did the third elder oppose us, but the seventh elder also opposed us. The third elder wanted to win the support of the seventh elder, so he desired for both of their descendants to join together in marriage. The seventh elder had a great-grandson called Ruan Dongxia, and he already had feelings for Xueyin to begin with. With the support of his elders, he was naturally able to linger around Xueyin all the time. Xueyin pushed back against the third elder's proposal of arranged marriage several times, yet her complaints were ignored each time. At the same time, she naturally remained cold and indifferent to Ruan Dongxia. This caused Ruan Dongxia to greatly detest me, so he used his 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike to severely wound me. He wanted me to die in great agony. When Xueyin learned of this, she immediately took me with her to leave the Star Moon sect. In order to avoid capture, we carefully concealed our tracks along the way. However, upon reaching this place, my wounds had already deteriorated to an uncontrollable state. We had no choice but to stop. Upon learning that there was a skilled alchemist here, Xueyin went over to work as a maid. After toiling away for 2 years, she finally managed to sneak into the alchemy room to steal the undying pills for me. This was all because of me. Xueyin is innocent. Do whatever you want, but target me instead. Whoa, so pitiful, someone said through sobs. They looked over, only to see tears streaming down Fuyu's face. This was a fairly exaggerated reaction. Ling Han and the others exchanged a glance. They couldn't help but think that this person was fairly sentimental and easily moved. Just then, he had still wanted to slice open this man's stomach to retrieve the undying pill. Now, however, he was sobbing uncontrollably after hearing Guoming's tragic story. Oi, 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 your reaction is far too exaggerated, no? Ling Han said as he patted Fuyu's shoulder. Woo, aren't you moved? Fuyu asked through sobs. A little bit. However, not to the same extent as you, Ling Han said. He couldn't help but shiver. Had this person reincarnated into the wrong body? How was he so sentimental and emotional? He should have reincarnated as a woman. At the very least, others most likely wouldn't find it weird if a woman were moved to tears. Woo, so pitiful, so pitiful. Fuyu sobbed. He completely ignored Ling Han and the others. Even Guo Ming was rendered speechless. Even though he was the protagonist of the story, and even though he would also feel pained at times, how could a man shed tears so easily? How could they be reduced to such a state? To say nothing else, even Xueyan hadn't cried so miserably before. Oi, how long are you going to embarrass yourself for? Ling Han asked with a sigh. Don't disturb me. Let me cry for a bit longer. Hunyo immediately lost her patience. Pa! With a kick, Fuyu was instantly sent flying, smashing a hole into the mud and straw house. He then transformed into a small black that vanished into the distance. Poor child. Brother Ming, a female voice exclaimed in worry. A woman immediately rushed into the house. She was none other than Lu Xueyan, the weak woman that Ling Han and the others had encountered before. Upon seeing the people in the room, all of whom she had encountered before, the color immediately drained from Lu Xueyan's face. They had been exposed? Their victims were here to settle the debt now? This has nothing to do with Brother Ming. It was all my doing. Whatever punishment you have in mind, target me, she shouted. No, it was all because of me. Punish me. Guo Ming hurriedly exclaimed. It was me. No, it was me. The two of them fought to take responsibility for the crime. This was truly a moving scene. Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head and say, Are you too stupid? You still want to shoulder the responsibility alone? We're naturally going to capture both of you. No, you can't do that. Guo Ming and Lu Xueyan exclaimed. They wore terrified expressions as they furiously shook their heads. Xueyan, let's become husband and wife again in our next life. All right, Brother Ming. The lovers exchanged a glance before suddenly slapping at their own temples. They were going to shatter their own divine senses to commit suicide. Ling Han immediately reached over. Wang. A powerful force surged forth, forcefully stopping the two people's movements. Say, are you two a bit too impulsive? He said with a sigh. I never said that I would capture you. That's right, huh? Guo Ming and Lu Xueyan exchanged a glance, and they could both see the lingering fear in each other's eyes. They had almost committed suicide for love. Ling Han was rendered speechless. What in the world were they feeling relieved about? If he hadn't interfered, they would have already died. Why did he always come across such people? Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, This poisonous wound, I reckon I can treat it. For real? Guo Ming and Lu Xueyan exclaimed. They could barely believe what they were hearing. Ling Han nodded and asked, That Ruan Dongxia was most likely at the dividing soul tier, am I correct? Was he at the heaven soul or earth soul? Earth soul. Lu Xueyan immediately replied. She instantly felt more confident in Ling Han's abilities. If Ruan Dongxia had been at the immortal palace tier, Ling Han would have been powerless to help. However, since he was at the same major tier as Ling Han could still use his source power of wood to help. This source power possessed the most powerful vitality, so in theory, it could treat all kinds of wounds. There were many people who needed help in this world, and Ling Han wasn't trying to be a savior, either. He wouldn't stick his nose into everyone's business. However, since he had come across this situation, he was naturally willing to do his part to help. Woo! So pitiful. We definitely have to help them. Fuyu said as he returned. His eyes were already puffy from crying. This person was beyond saving. You guys go outside first. I need to channel some cultivation technique to treat him, Ling Han said. Yes, yes. Lu Xueyan hurriedly replied with a nod. If Ling Han harbored evil intentions, there was absolutely no need for him to go to so much trouble. He could have directly attacked them. After all, neither of them was a match for Ling Han. You go outside as well, Ling Han said to Fuyu. Huh, I also need to go outside? Fuyu asked in a daze. Go out, Hunyo said. She walked over, and picked Fuyu up before striding out. Ling Han was naturally shooing everyone away to keep the secret of his Black Tower. After everyone left, Ling Han knocked Guoming unconscious with a palm strike before drawing him into the Black Tower. The power of time flowed, and the Black Tower started to experience a time scale 1,000 times faster than the outside world. Ling Han started to treat Guoming, activating his source power of wood and funneling it into his body. He started to eliminate the poison bit by bit. If Ling Han fought with Ruan Dongxia, he could most likely dispose of him in a few hundred exchanges. However, eliminating the poison that the man had left in Guoming's body was a much more difficult task. In simple terms, destruction was much easier than construction. Not to mention, this was a case of large-scale construction after large-scale destruction. This could only be resolved with effort and time. Moreover, this was only because Ling Han was practicing the indestructible Heaven Scroll and possessed extraordinary comprehension of life and death that far surpassed that of ordinary dividing soul tier cultivators. Otherwise, most cultivators only knew how to fight and kill. As for healing and saving, impossible. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, 3 years had already passed in the Black Tower. Only at this time did Ling Han finally retract his hand. He breathed a long sigh of relief. He had already eliminated the poison in Guoming's body. A smile spread across his face. During this process, he gained an even deeper understanding of how to channel the source power of wood. Not only had he saved someone, but he had even received some benefits himself. Sure enough, the heavens wouldn't treat good people unfairly. Chapter 2035, Arrival of Ruan Dongxia. Chapter 2035, Arrival of Ruan Dongxia. Ling Han exited the Black Tower with Guoming and shouted, "You can all enter now." "Brother Ming," Lu Shuiyan exclaimed as she immediately rushed in. She focused her gaze on Guoming, who was currently lying on the bed. After observing him for a brief moment, she was instantly as moved as could be. His face was a healthy shade of red, and his aura was also extremely stable. There were no signs of any wound. He had been healed, fully healed. Moreover, it had only taken a single day. She immediately fell to her knees and said, "Benefactor." Ling Han made a waving motion, pulling her up from the ground. He then shook Guoming awake. "Xshuiyan, Brother Ming." The pair of lovers erupted into tears as they embraced. They had just escaped from the clutches of death, so they were naturally filled with an overwhelming sensation of relief. "Brother Ming, have you truly recovered?" Lu Shuiyan murmured. "Yes, I've made a full recovery. I'm not dreaming, am I?" "No." They were overtaken with emotion, and they surprisingly started to passionately lock lips as if no one were around. So moving, Fuyu remarked. Upon seeing Fuyu's reaction, Ling Han felt like he could never take him seriously anymore. He would definitely be blinded by his emotional displays. "Ling Han, Nyo also wants a kiss," Hunyo said. She stuck her lips out as she shuffled over. Ling Han laughed heartily, and he quickly turned around to peck Hunyo's lips. Bewitching Maiden Ro shuffled over and said, "I also want one. Go find some shade." Bewitching Maiden Ro couldn't help but feel disappointed. This stinky man. All she wanted was a kiss. Did he really need to be so stingy? "Kiss, kiss." "Sure lay, and sure you," shouted from the side. "Lu Shuiyan," someone roared in a thundering voice. Lu Shuiyan's and Guoming's expression instantly changed. They were far too familiar with this voice. This voice belonged to none other than the person who had caused them so much pain and suffering. "Ruan Dongxiang, did you think you could escape from my palm?" Ruan Dongxiang asked. "I only remained hidden to let you suffer the consequence of daring to steal my woman. In 3 days, the poisonous wound on Guoming's body will fully erupt. In 7 days, he'll die a violent death. I'm going to accompany you as we watch this trash die an agonizing death. After that, I'll take you back." "What should we do?" Lu Shuiyan asked as she looked at Guoming. They had finally healed his wounds after going to so much trouble, yet Ruan Dongxiang had already caught up to them. It was as if he were driving them to death. Guoming gritted his teeth before suddenly kneeling down to Ling Han and saying, "Benefactor, I know that I already owe you a life, so I shouldn't beg you for any more help. However, I genuinely have no other options, so I can only beg you for help. I hope that you can help my wife safely leave this place. As my gratitude, I have a treasure that I'm willing to give you." "Brother Ming, no?" Shuiyan exclaimed as she leaped onto Guoming. "We either live together or die together." "Shuiyan." The two of them wrapped their arms around each other. "Ha ha ha ha. Cry, cry to your heart's content. Savor your last moments together." Ruan Dongxia roared with a wanton laugh. As he gazed at this pair of lovers, Ling Han involuntarily thought of his own parents. At that time, they had most likely gone through a similar experience. The difference was that his mother had already been pregnant with him. Since he had just saved Guoming's life, he naturally couldn't watch him die just like that. He chuckled to himself before exiting the small house. Who are you?" Ruan Dongxiang asked as he saw this unfamiliar man walking out of the house. His face involuntarily darkened. "Fuck. This B*TH isn't cucking me, is she?" However, several women followed after Ling Han, and each of them was breathtakingly beautiful. He couldn't help but gulp in lust. At this moment, he completely forgot about the fact that Lu Shuiyan might have cucked him. "Me?" Ling Han asked with a faint smile. "I'm just a passerby." Ruan Dongxiang humphed and said, "Since you know that you're a passerby, you also understand that this has got nothing to do with you, right? Don't stick your nose into other people's business." "I've never liked sticking my nose into other people's business. I simply want to pummel you," Ling Han said. "Pummel me?" Ruan Dongxiang faltered for a moment. When he came to his senses, he involuntarily laughed and said, "Do you know who I am?" "I do. You're a piece of trash." Ruan Dongxiang's expression instantly darkened. "I'm the great-grandson of the seventh elder of the Star Moon sect. My great-grandfather is an immortal palace tier elite. In the celestial realm, immortal palace tier cultivators could indeed be referred to as elites." "Oh, what's that got to do with me?" Ling Han asked. "Does it have anything to do with me pummeling you?" "I'm also an Earth Soul elite," Ruan Dongxiang continued. "With my strength and with my background, you still want to challenge me? You speak too much nonsense," Ling Han said as he strode toward Ruan Dongxiang. "What a troublemaker." Ruan Dongxiang spat in disgust. However, a sinister smile crept across his face when he swept his gaze over the Empress and the others. "However, I should thank you for bringing me so many beauties." Smack! His smile had barely spread across his face when he suddenly suffered a heavy punch to the cheek. He was instantly sent flying. "You actually dared to hit me?" Ruan Dongxiang asked in incredulity as he picked himself up from the ground. He rubbed his nose and glanced at his hand, only to see that it was filled with blood. He couldn't help but tremble. He wasn't trembling in fear, but rather in fury. From birth until now, who had ever hit him before? Moreover, this was a strike to the face. "You've made me angry now." He shook his right hand, and strands of light immediately appeared in the air. There were 7 strands in total. 7 blooms, 7 poisons, palm strike. Shuiyan exclaimed. She had also walked out with Guoming. There was intense fear in her voice. After all, her lover had been tortured by this poisonous attack for so many years. In fact, he had almost been tortured to an agonizing death. "Be careful, benefactor," Lu Shuiyan hurriedly said in warning. "This poisonous palm strike is the ultimate technique of the 7th Elder's branch. According to rumors, he learned this technique from an ancient Ruan. In fact, it might even be an ascending origin tier secret technique." Ling Han simply replied with a smile. He didn't take this warning to heart. Cleansing the poison from Guoming's body had indeed been difficult. However, with his physique, only those at or above the immortal palace tier could hope to poison him. After all, poison was also a regulation of heaven and earth. This was no different from any other regulation. "That's right. This is the 7 blooms, 7 poisons palm strike," Ruan Dongxiang said with pride. Those who are struck by the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike will suffer for an entire 7 years, during which time 7 flowers will bloom on their bodies. When these 7 flowers reach full bloom, the victim will die of decomposition within 7 days. He glanced at Guoming with a cold chuckle and said, "The 7th flower has most likely bloomed inside him already. Death is already knocking on the door, huh? Strange. Why is his face such a healthy shade of red? Why does he look completely fine? Impossible. This is far too strange. Perhaps my poison was cleansed? How is that possible?" Ruan Dongxia was confident that even immortal palace tier elites couldn't cleanse the poison of the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike. The reason for this was simple. Destruction was far easier than construction. His poison had already become one with Guoming's body, so trying to cleanse the poison would inevitably require destroying Guoming's body. Thus, cleansing the poison would be equivalent to killing Guoming. That being the case, his poison naturally couldn't be cleansed. Perhaps ascending origin tier elites could give it a try. However, since the most powerful member of the Star Moon sect was only at the Immortal Palace tier, he naturally couldn't invite an ascending origin tier elite to try and cleanse his poison. Guoming's eyes were bloodshot, and he said, "Ruan Dongxia, you didn't expect this, did you? Your poison has actually been cleansed." His expression was as if he wanted to eat Ruan Dongxia alive. Chapter 2036, Clash of Decrees. Chapter 2036, Clash of Decrees. These 7 years could be considered the most agonizing 7 years of Guoming's lifetime. If it were not for Lu Shuiyan's sake, he might have long since committed suicide. Even if Lu Shuiyan had stolen the undying pill for him, it was only capable of keeping him barely alive. Whatever suffering he had to sustain, he would still have to endure, which would allow him to live for a few more years before being tortured to death by the 7 blooms 7 poisons palm strike. A poisoned injury would always need a specific medicine to be cured. And now that he had been saved from the hellish abyss by Ling Han, just how strong was Guoming's hatred towards Ruan Dongxia? However strong his hatred was towards Ruan Dongxia, that was how strong his gratitude was towards Ling Han. Ruan Dongxia's expression was incredibly dark. He had not killed Guoming on the spot because he hated this person too much and wanted him to endure as much torture as possible before finally dying. Yet now he was standing right in front of him, looking like he had completely recovered. This was unacceptable to him. "Passerby, not only do you like to meddle in other people's business, you are also too nosy," Ruan Dongxia said menacingly, his killing intent blazing. "Oh." Ling Han nodded, breaking into a grin. "Going by that account, I do indeed quite like to meddle in the business of others. If you don't like it, come bite me." Sharp tongue. Ruan Dongxia humphed coldly. With a shake of his right hand, a rolled-up scroll appeared in his hand. This was a precious treasure his great-grandfather had bestowed on him for protection, and it was a decree that this 7th elder had personally forged himself. The moment it was opened, it would send out an attack on the level of peak stage Heaven Soul. Precisely because he had this decree, Ruan Dongxia was still filled with overwhelming confidence, even though he had just been sent flying with a single punch from Ling Han. Of course, he, too, wished to possess a stronger device, but the Star Moon sect was just a 3-star force, and the fact that they were able to give him this decree was already very impressive. "You wish to use this bit of scrap paper to scare me?" Ling Han asked with a smile. "Benefactor, be careful. This is not a piece of scrap paper, but a decree," Guoming hurriedly pointed out. Ling Han couldn't help but feel exasperated. Did the other party really think that he was very ignorant? Ruan Dongxia, meanwhile, laughed loudly. "That's right. This is a decree, capable of killing all dividing soul tiers. In terms of battle prowess, you are indeed just that bit stronger than me, but in terms of treasures, there is no way you can compare to me." "Idiot!" Fu Yu shook his head. "N?" Ruan Dongxia looked over, involuntarily showing a sliver of anger in his expression. Why was there always someone appearing repeatedly to cause trouble and oppose him? "You are really an idiot." Fu Yu also drew out a scroll. "I, too, have a decree here, so let us compare." Because he had been apprehended with a single move from Ling Han previously, he had not even managed to reveal his trump card. As the only male descendant in 3 generations of the Fu clan, how could he not have some powerful treasures in his possession? Ultimately, it was Ling Han that had moved too quickly earlier, and Fu Yu had not expected that he would also encounter danger in United Link City. Ruan Dongxia couldn't help but scoff. They were just a bunch of trash, so what treasures could they take out? They had to be just trying to scare him off. If you people are so determined to seek death, I shall oblige. He flew into rage out of humiliation. Just think, he was a person that could oppress and tyrannize as he liked in the Star Moon sect, but here he had actually been mocked repeatedly and had even sustained a punch. His killing intent blazed at this. He immediately opened the scroll. A shadowy line spread out, forming multiple seals, but not a single seal could be recognized. These were seals of Great Tao, a script belonging to the heaven and earth. When the scroll was completely unfurled, all the characters shattered and then formed a massive black beast. It had the head of a tiger, body of an ox, tail of a scorpion, and a singular horn sprouting from its head. With a twisted expression, it roared, and the surrounding space suddenly shattered in an instant. Ling Han moved, channeling the regulations of space, and stowing away all the power of regulation that had seeped out. Otherwise, this small village would be instantly shattered to smithereens. Ruan Dongxia saw this and was not overly shocked. That was because this was just a sliver of might from the decree, so it was very normal that Ling Han managed to block it. This is practically weak beyond description, Fu Yu said in disdain. He, too, broke open his scroll. Wang, silvery light shot out in a blaze. It was just light that was exuding out now, and when it shone on that massive black beast, this monster began to crumble like it was a buildup of snow that had encountered fire. What? Ruan Dongxia paled in shock. The decree was his strongest, as well as his last resort, but its might had not been fully unleashed yet, and it had already been destroyed. His heart almost exploded at this. A decree was definitely a manifestation of the power that a force had. The logic was very simple. Compared to such treasures like celestial tools and pseudo-celestial tools, the method of construction of a decree was considerably much simpler. One only had to use the hide of an immortal beast that was up to standard as the paper, and the blood of an immortal beast as ink, and when one had reached the severing mundane tier and cultivation level, anyone could easily create a decree. The stronger the might of the divided soul, the higher the requirements were for the materials used to create the decree, such as using the fur and blood of the dividing soul tier level, or immortal palace tier level beasts, but the creator would also have to be a dividing soul tier or immortal palace tier elite. Though these materials were not cheap, either, compared to other objects, this was indeed the most easily created item. He had already taken out a decree that had been created by an immortal palace tier elite, possessing the attack power of the dividing soul tier, yet it could not even hold up to a streak of light from the other. Just how wide was the gap here? A complete domination from superiority by a major tier. Being able to draw out a decree that had immortal palace tier's attack power, what kind of concept was that? The other definitely had an immortal palace tier elite behind him, or even ascending origin tier. Ruan Dongxia's feelings of superiority immediately crumbled. If the other party was the heir of a 4-star force, then he would really have met his match. He would be dead before he even knew it. I admit defeat, he called out hurriedly. This decree had just been unfurled a little, and it was already so terrifying. So just how frightening would it be when it was fully unfurled? He had no wish to die. Just because you say you admit defeat, I have to spare you? Fu Yu jeered and unfurled the entire scroll without the slightest hesitation. Immediately, silvery light blazed brightly. Xiao, a sword light flew out from the scroll and slashed towards Ruan Dongxia in a flash, passing him quickly. The sword light surged past, and Ruan Dongxia's whole person also disappeared completely. The might of this decree was comparable to an immortal palace tier, and for an immortal palace tier to make a move on a dividing soul tier, what would be so strange that the latter would completely disappear without a trace? Fuck, this was a waste. Ling Han shook his head. Even killing a piece of trash like Ruan Dongxia, he had to use an Immortal Palace tier-level decree. He really had cash to burn. However, in any case, it wasn't Ling Han's cash that was being burnt. Fu Yu sent a reserved smile at Ling Han. This attack was mainly shown for Ling Han's benefit, expressing the fact that he was actually very strong as well. Of course, he personally was the type to be easily touched, and also bore the intention of venting his anger on Guoming and his wife's behalf. Pa! The back of his head immediately sustained a smack, as he heard Hunyou say, "Ugly. What kind of expression and look do you have there? Do you want to rebel?" The force of this strike was extremely strong, and he stumbled from the impact. Fu Yu couldn't help but feel depressed. He only wanted to show off a bit. Did she have to treat him like this? Be benefactors, you have gotten into trouble. Meanwhile, Guoming was stunned silly. That was the 4th-generation grandchild of the 7th elder of the Star Moon sect, and now he had died here. This would cause a huge commotion. Ling Han shrugged and said, "What does it have to do with me? I wasn't the one who killed him." Meanwhile, Fu Yu smirked arrogantly. "So what about it? Does the Star Moon sect dare to come and seek me out for vengeance?" The Fu clan was a 4-star force, so how could a mere 3-star force actually dare come to seek their own destruction? Moreover, even if their positions were exchanged, wouldn't the Fu clan still have a celestial king backing them up? Ling Han shook his head. "Let me tell you a bit of bad news. Though you have used a decree, you did not manage to kill that Ruan guy." Chapter 2037, Black Ring. Chapter 2037, Black Ring. Impossible. Fu Yu immediately expressed disbelief. An Immortal Palace tier-level decree had shown its might, so how could it be that it was not able to kill a mere dividing soul tier? What kind of joke was that? Meanwhile, Ling Han grinned as he countered, "Do you want to make a bet, then?" "What kind of bet?" Fu Yu asked immediately. 100 million star stones. Fu Yu's face involuntarily flushed. This made him recall the mishap that he had caused. He had not even gotten anything clarified yet, but had already asked someone to take 100 million star stones as ransom for him. "All right," he immediately answered. Since someone was so determined to give him money, there naturally was no reason for him to refuse. Only then did Ling Han slowly say, "This Ruan guy isn't the main body, but just a divided soul of his." "Ah." Fu Yu paused. "Are you sure?" "Pa." The back of his head immediately sustained a smack, and he heard Hunyou angrily declare, "Niu's Ling Han already said that is a divided soul, so he must be a fake. What? You want to renege on the bet?" The Empress also showed a menacing expression. He dared to swindle the money of their Ling clan? Fu Yu couldn't help but feel depressed. "Though I am not a sore loser, aren't you guys committing daylight robbery here? Just because you say he's a fake? He is? I can't even doubt it." Ling Han laughed loudly and pulled Fu Yu along with him as he walked forwards. Pay careful attention. A divided soul was formed by extracting a sliver of the spirit from the main body, and the largest difference it had with the main body was in the amount of spirit it contained. Fu Yu sensed earnestly, and after a while, he couldn't help but curse as he said, "It is indeed a divided soul." Though Ruan Dongxiang's spirit had already shattered, it had happened quite recently, so it wasn't very difficult for him to still be able to sense it vaguely. "Thanks for the business, 100 million star stones." Ling Han extended a hand. Thanks. Hunyou copied him, extending her hand as well. Xiao Gu was not willing to be left behind, either, impatiently stretching out his hand as well. "Fuck, is it really proper for you guys to do this?" Fu Yu couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. These 3 people were all very strong, but why did they all look very undependable? Luckily, he did not die. Meanwhile, Guoming breathed a sigh of relief. Though losing a divided soul was a major injury, as long as he had not died, anything could be earned back through cultivation. However, he was also slightly despondent. If Ruan Dongxiang had not died, then didn't it mean that he and Lu Shuiyan would still be hunted down? Am I the type to renege on a bet? Fu Yu asked in displeasure. "Fine. Come with me to get the ransom money." "Oh, no, the betting stakes." Hearing him speak of ransom money, Ling Han and the others all burst into loud laughter. This guy was really quite amusing. Benefactor, please wait, Guoming hurriedly said. And? Ling Han turned to look at him. I am indebted to Benefactor for having rescued me twice. I do not have anything valuable on me, just an item that has been passed down for generations. Guoming drew out a ring and handed it over to Ling Han. I am willing to gift it to Benefactor. What is it? Hunyou asked curiously and snatched this ring. I don't know either. Guoming shook his head with a grimace. It is said that my ancestor had obtained it unexpectedly. About several million years ago, my ancestor went into the mountains to cut firewood and unexpectedly encountered two cultivators who were fighting each other to the death for the sake of an object. In the end, one of them won, but not too long after, he, too, died as his injuries were too severe. That treasure that they had been fighting over was thus brought back by my ancestor, and that is this ring. But even when my ancestor passed away, he still had not figured out what is so special about this ring. Generation after generation, the ancestors of the Gua clan all wanted to know what was so precious about this ring, but without exception, their efforts had all come to nothing. When it was passed down to me, I, too, had studied it for a very long time, and had also flipped through a great many ancient scrolls in the Star Moon sect, but still did not get any results. Though this could be completely useless, I still wish to gift it to Benefactor. Perhaps it would be of use in the hands of Benefactor. Nyou's. Hunyou's eyes narrowed in a glare as she said, What is it? You want to snatch Nyou's belongings? Now that it had fallen into her hands, it naturally was hers now. Meanwhile, Fuyu wanted to weep to the heavens. He clearly had helped out as well, but why was this married couple not even bothered to say a word of thanks to him? Furthermore, he had not called them into account for the matter of the undying pill yet, either. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious, and took this ring from Hunyou's hands. He placed it in the palm of his hand and surveyed it. This ring was really plain. It was just a small black ring, without any adornments on it. At first, Ling Han had thought this could be a spatial treasure, but no matter how much he used his divine sense to touch it, it did not react in the slightest. Then that shouldn't be it. He squeezed it hard, yet shockingly discovered that this thing was actually completely intact. This was very surprising. Just how great was Ling Han's strength by now? In the case of 2-star pseudo-divine metal, fingerprints would appear if he squeezed it hard, and even 3-star pseudo-divine metal would possibly slightly change shape. But now, this ring was completely unscathed. Should he use the divine demon sword to deal with it? This thought flashed through Ling Han's mind and then vanished. He shook his head. What if this thing was really useful? It would be too much of a waste if it were to be swallowed by the divine demon sword. I still want to try it out, though. Ling Han couldn't help but summon the divine demon sword. He would control it in the nick of time, and only wanted to give it a try. He placed the ring on the blade of the divine demon sword. Wong, the divine demon sword trembled slightly, but an incident that astonished Ling Han appeared. The ring did not react at all. This, though the divine demon sword was only a 4-star pseudo-celestial tool, it was previously already mentioned that 3 stars, 5 stars, 10 stars, and so on were only human-made divisions. In terms of the essence of the regulations of metal, divine metal was the standard after godly metal, and the concept of pseudo-divine metal did not exist. The so-called pseudo-divine metal was forged having layer after layer of level 20 divine metal fused together, and in terms of essence, it was still level 20 divine metal. Which also meant that there was not the slightest bit of difference in difficulty for the divine demon sword to swallow a 1-star pseudo-divine metal and 10-star pseudo-divine metal. However, because the 10-star pseudo-divine metal had more divine metal fused within it, the sword would need a longer time to swallow it. If the ring could not be swallowed by the divine demon sword, there were only 2 possibilities. Firstly, this was not metal at all, so the divine demon sword naturally could do nothing against it. However, Ling Han was sure that this was definitely metal, genuine and no deception about it, because he possessed a metal element source power of heaven and earth. If he still could not distinguish whether this was metal or not, then he might as well just jump into a river and commit suicide. But since it was metal, yet could not be swallowed, then it would have to be the second possibility. This was divine metal? Strictly speaking, the divine demon sword was still a god tool now, and also godly metal. The name of pseudo-celestial tool was only the label that was attached by the people of the celestial realm. Since that was the case, how could godly metal possibly be able to swallow divine metal? Wouldn't it be stuffed until it burst? Thus, the divine demon sword did not react in the slightest, and the ring was also completely unmoved. Divine metal? Ling Han couldn't help but jump madly in his heart. Was this the precious tool of a celestial king? No wonder people had fought to death over it, and had even killed each other. This kind of precious treasure was indeed incredibly tempting to others. He did not tell Guoming about his deduction. Smiling, he said, "What use this ring has, I am not sure either for the moment. However, I am sure that this is indeed a treasure. Benefactor, you have already saved us twice, so how could we still accept gifts from you?" Guoming and his wife declined. Chapter 2038. Young Master has gone mad. Chapter 2038. Young Master has gone mad. Guoming and his wife kept declining. They really couldn't bring themselves to take further gifts from Ling Han, but they could not hold up against Ling Han's insistence and could only accept those alchemical pills. Ling Han also gave them some reincarnation tea, compensating Guoming and his wife as much as possible. Even though he still did not know what use that ring had, merely the fact that it was forged from divine metal made it worth it. On the sidelines, Fu Yu's expression was filled with hurt. He had also helped out, but why did it seem like he had been forgotten? You guys are too mean. Guoming and his wife decided to leave United Link City after a few days. This time, the Seven Blooms Seven Poisons Palm Strike's influence within Guoming's body had also been dispelled, so they were sure that Ruan Dongxia could not possibly catch up with them again. "All right, we should leave too." Ling Han stretched out languidly. Fu Yu played around with the alchemical vial that Guoming and his wife returned to him. There were still 9 undying pills inside here. He stowed the vial away and said, "Let's go to my place first." He had never been the type to avoid repaying his debts. "What is it? You want to lay a trap for us and capture us in a single scoop?" Ling Han asked with a grin. "That's right. You guys don't dare to come?" Fu Yu challenged. Pa! Hunyo delivered a smack right onto the back of Fu Yu's head. "Fu Yu, be polite when you speak." Fu Yu looked plaintively at her. "Is it very polite of you to hit me then?" He did not dare to say these words to Hunyo. He had already suffered enough in the hands of this little girl these 2 days. Furthermore, he had developed a clear understanding that no matter how beautiful a woman was, she possibly could still be incredibly violent. Gentleness had never had any relation to appearance. "All right, let's collect our winnings," Ling Han said with a grin. Initially, he had only been joking with Fu Yu, but since the latter was so determined to give him 100 million Starstonus, then there was no reason for him to refuse either, right? After all, the divine demon sword was still quite far away from becoming a real celestial tool, and he was in dire need of a great amount of star stones. The party returned. On their way back, there was no need for Hunyo to sniff around. Thus, their speed had increased considerably. After about more than a day, they had already returned to the main city center. "Young Master." The moment they arrived, they saw a great many people gather around them, and the person in the lead was Fu Yu's protector. The old man glared and demanded, "What have you done to young Master in these several days? Otherwise, why else would they have disappeared quietly?" "Uncle Yu, where are the star stones?" Fu Yu asked. "Oh, here." Uncle Yu drew out a spatial ring. Fu Yu strode over, and after taking it from him, strode back to Ling Han's side and tossed the ring over. There is definitely no problem with my, Fu Yu's, character as a gambler. Seeing this scene, everyone, including Uncle Yu, were dumbfounded. "Fuck, has your brain been kicked by a donkey?" Just now, their young master could have clearly escaped from the hands of the devil, but now he actually took the initiative to take the ransom money and hand it over to Ling Han. Was there something wrong with him? Could it be that this was not young master? Uncle Yu hurriedly swept his divine sense over him, but there was not the slightest issue. This really was his young master. Young master, could it be that your divided soul has been captured? Uncle Yu asked. Otherwise, why would he act in this manner? Even though the death of the divided soul would not cause any injury to the main body, the divided soul was still a portion of spirit that had been split out from the main body. Then, it definitely would still affect the main body, especially for those prodigies who were aiming for the high pinnacle of cultivation. This effect would be massive. Fuyu shook his head and said, Uncle Yu, there is no need to fret. These are my friends. Friends? Were there such friends that would rob you of 100 million star stones on the first meeting? Oh no, young master has really become abnormal. Just what did he experience in the last few days? In front of the wide eyes of the masses, Fuyu escorted Ling Han and his group into the Fu Manor, providing a cordial reception. Because Fuyu was the only descendant within 3 generations, the matter of his kidnapping had even alerted Old Master Fu. He had made an exception and summoned Ling Han. And when Ling Han knew that this Old Master Fu Bo, was a 4-star alchemist, he gladly agreed. Greetings, Senior Fu. When he was led by Fuyu into the main hall, Ling Han greeted the elder that was seated at the seat of the host respectfully. Fu Bo, the actual ruler of United Link City and the chief alchemist under the moon-plucking Celestial King. Not only was he a 4-star alchemist, he had also advanced to the ascending origin tier in terms of cultivation. Though alchemists were very weak in a battle of equal cultivation levels, ascending origin tier was still ascending origin tier, after all. Wanting to suppress any immortal palace tier would only be a piece of cake. Dispense with the courtesies. The old man raised his hand. His hair was completely white, and even his brows and beard were white, but the rosiness and smoothness of his complexion was like a baby's. He stared at Ling Han for a while, and then only did he say, I heard that you kidnapped my grandson? A show of strength right from the start then. Ling Han smiled and said, Senior has misunderstood. Oh, since it is a misunderstanding, why did you accept 100 million star stones from our Fu clan? The old man asked calmly. It looked like the old man wanted to take this 100 million star stones back. Ling Han naturally would not agree. How could he possibly hand out something that had already entered his pockets? He immediately changed the topic and said, I have a question on alchemy that I would like to ask Senior. Fu Bo immediately showed an expression of surprise. He knew that Ling Han was a cultivation prodigy and could suppress his grandson even when he himself was only a young soul, and only a Celestial King tier-level great sect would be able to nurture monarch tiers. This was also why he had only pressured Ling Han, and had not made it physical. Whatever that had been swindled had to be returned, but at the same time, he could not offend him too far, either. Yet Ling Han actually wanted to ask him a question on alchemy. What fuck business is that of yours? Yet Ling Han simply continued to speak without concern. After leaving the Eastern Celestial Realm, he had never neglected his studies of alchemy even throughout these many years, and he had indeed accumulated a great many questions and doubts. At first, Fu Bo was unconcerned, but his expression became solemn very soon, and then he even showed an expression of excitement. Prodigy, this was an alchemy prodigy. Fu Bo had not taken any disciples, but had rather passed on all the comprehension of alchemy he had accumulated throughout his lifetime to his son. Yet his son did not have natural talent in alchemist, and just barely managed to become a 1-star alchemist. Meanwhile, his grandson only had very high natural talent in cultivation, and could not inherit his legacy either. This was a regret that he had always had, worrying that his knowledge of alchemy would thus die out. And now that he had suddenly seen an extraordinary genius of alchemy, his heart instantly soared. He couldn't help but want to take him as a disciple so he could pass on his knowledge. The moment this intention to treasure talent arose, whatever Ling Han asked, he would explain with great care, only fearing that this prodigy would take a misstep and be misled onto the wrong path. That would be a loss to the entire field of alchemy, and would cause him to grieve and lament. The elder and youth continued to discuss alchemy endlessly, causing Fuyu to feel both stunned and bored. He had initially thought that Ling Han was only doing it for show for the benefit of the old man to gain the old man's favor. He had never thought that Ling Han was really capable of alchemy, and it seemed like his accomplishments in the field were not too low either. Otherwise, how could it possibly make the old man so serious? But Ling Han is clearly a monarch tier of cultivation. Was there really anyone so freakish in this world that could be prodigiously talented in two completely different fields? And what was boring was the fact that he really did not have the slightest interest in alchemy. As he listened to the two of them talk, it was like a fantasy story, making him feel so bored that he kept yawning. Furthermore, without getting the approval of his grandfather, how could he possibly dare to leave without permission? Thus, he could only suffer on the sidelines as he accompanied them, feeling discomfort that was indescribable fill his entire body. Finally, a whole 10 days later, the two of them finally stopped. I still have a question. Let's leave it for later. Leave it for later. Fuyu hurriedly pulled Ling Han up and ran off without looking back. Previously, Ling Han had also said that he had a question, and Fuyu was already forced to sit there for 10 whole days. If there was another question that Ling Han was asking, would Fuyu even live through it? Chapter 2039, 100 Dragon City. Chapter 2039, 100 Dragon City. Fuck, the star stones. Only after Ling Han had been pulled out the main doors did old Master Fu suddenly remember that the reason he had summoned Ling Han was to ask for the return of those 100 million star stones. Yet, in the end, he had been conned by Ling Han into actually forgetting it. This brat is really sly. The old man shook his head repeatedly. However, with his status, once this matter was mentioned once, there naturally could not be a second mention. Forget it. On the basis of Ling Han's talent in alchemy, he would consider those 100 million star stones as providing funding for him. Right, an alchemy gathering will be held at 100 Dragon City soon. Various prodigies from all over would be gathering, and this would not be a bad opportunity for this brat. I shall write an introduction letter for this brat then, and lend him a helping hand. Fuyu was really quite a generous person. After turning from enemies into friends with Ling Han, he brought Ling Han all over to play every single day, almost causing the Empress and Hu Niu to be displeased. Could it be that he wanted to snatch their man from them? 4 days later, Fuyu came to seek out Ling Han again. Brother Ling, there is a great happy occasion. A great happy occasion? This guy called out immediately upon entering the doors. What is it? Are you pregnant? Ling Han asked with a laugh. You're the one who's pregnant. Your whole family's pregnant. Fuyu quickly countered. It was really easy to be led astray. He had only been around Ling Han for a few days, and this guy's verbal ability had increased at least 3 times over. Xiao Gu saw this with his eyes, heard this with his ears, and involuntarily mumbled. He was constantly learning. Where does this happiness come from? Ling Han asked. My grandfather has given you a referral. You can go to 100 Dragon City and attend a gathering of prodigies, Fuyu said. Oh, what kind of gathering? Ling Han wasn't very interested. Firstly, he wanted to go to the Universal Peace Heaven. Having missed a gathering of alchemy, no matter what, he still had to go to offer an explanation for his absence. Secondly, he had to ask around about which heavenly realm the Rock Palace was in. 100 Dragon City? Not interested. It is rumored that in ancient times, there were more than 100 immortal dragons buried in 100 Dragon City. Afterwards, 100 Dragon City was built on the site. This is a holy land. Every several 100 million years, the 100 Dragons tournament battles would be held there. It is said that the person who becomes champion would be instilled with the essence of the 100 dragons and obtain endless benefits. At the same time, a gathering of alchemy would also be hosted. Countless alchemy prodigies would gather here, contesting for the chance to enter into the ancient alchemy tower. Fuyu explained excitedly. He did not have much interest in alchemy, and his main target was the 100 Dragons tournament battles. Now, Ling Han was intrigued, and he asked, What is the ancient alchemy tower? What? You don't even know about the ancient alchemy tower? Fuyu was surprised. Even he, someone who had just roughly learnt some scraps of alchemy, knew of the ancient alchemy tower, yet Ling Han, this prodigy of alchemy, was actually completely blank. I don't know. Ling Han shook his head. If he did not know, he did not know. There was nothing embarrassing about it. Brother Ling, you really are a strange person, Fu Yu concluded and explained. The ancient alchemy tower is an alchemy organization. Very, very long ago, it had been established by all the five-star alchemists of that era. After a long time, the ancient alchemy tower slowly turned from a loosely connected organization into a closely knit one. It is not only an alliance of only five-star alchemists, but at the same time, it is also the holy land for the whole field of alchemy. For an alchemist, whether they had been approved by the ancient alchemy tower or not would mean a world of difference. Now, every alchemist would consider it an honor to be granted entry into the ancient alchemy tower. But every 100 million years, only the top 3 winners of the alchemy tournament of the 100 Dragon City would be qualified to join the ancient alchemy tower. Though it is said that we, as Celestials, have close to an unlimited lifespan, this kind of entry quota is still pitifully few. Brother Ling, if you could enter into the ancient alchemy tower, that would really be awesome. I guarantee that wherever you go, everyone will have to treat you politely. This is the strongest life-saving seal in the world. Ling Han gave an oso that was what the ancient alchemy tower was. Where is 100 Dragon City? He asked. In the Universal Peace Heaven. Ling Han stared blankly. The Universal Peace Heaven? Could it be that the place he and Ma Tongguang were to go to was 100 Dragon City? However, the alchemy tournament would only be held once every 100 million years, so the one previously definitely could not be this tournament. In any case, he wanted to go to the Universal Peace Heaven, so it was convenient. I need a referral to attend that alchemy tournament, he asked further. Of course. Fu Yu nodded. Just think, how many alchemists are there in this world? If there was no restriction, then wouldn't the 100 Dragon City be stuffed and burst? Ling Han laughed and said, Then I really have to thank your grandfather. Of course, only a 4-star alchemist is qualified to provide a referral. Furthermore, he can only give a single referral, Fu Yu said very matter-of-factly. Pa! Immediately a smack landed on the back of his head. He did not even have to look. It had to be Hunyo. Ugly, what are you so proud about? Indeed, Hunyo's voice rang out from behind him. Ling Han gave an O and asked, When do we set out? Soon, within a month or so. Taking advantage of the time of this month or so, Ling Han asked the old master a few more times about alchemy and also thanked him while he was at it. Time passed very quickly, and soon it was time for departure. Why are you coming along? Ling Han looked at Fu Yu, appearing slightly surprised. Fu Yu couldn't help but feel depressed and asked, What do you mean by that? Do you think that because my strength is not as strong as yours, I am not qualified to attend the 100 Dragons tournament battles? Ling Han nodded honestly and without reservations. That was exactly what he thought. Fuck, though I am not a monarch tier, I am still an emperor tier. Could it be that I am not even qualified to participate? Fu Yu retorted angrily. Participate? Ling Han laughed. You haven't suffered enough, is that it? Fuck off. There was no restriction on cultivation level for the 100 Dragons tournament battles, but there was an age requirement the participants could not be older than 10 million years old. This age limit included the time that had been spent under time acceleration effects. Thus, there really were not many people that could join. Of course, there were also some mediocre people who would participate, believing in their good luck, and thinking that those who were stronger than them would be barred from the tournament due to age. However, reality would deliver a harsh slap onto their faces. With the wealth of the Fu clan, they naturally would not have them walk the whole way there, but rather prepared a means of travel. That was a ground-piercing shuttle. It did not fly in the skies, but tunneled through the ground. The speed was similarly very fast, and there was no need for them to change course because of any obstruction in their way. The body of the ground-piercing shuttle was covered with earth element formations. When it entered the ground, it was just like having entered water or flying through air. There was only one word for it: fast. The shuttle wasn't big. This was to save on capital. After all, The larger the area that had to be covered with formations, the more expensive it would be. In any case, they had spatial god tools, so there would not be much effect. The majority of them entered into the Black Tower, and then the ground-piercing shuttle started, heading towards the Universal Peace Heaven. This trip to the Universal Peace Heaven would take them through 3 heavens and use about 7 months' time. And this was still because the ground-piercing shuttle was high-grade enough, so its speed was naturally fast enough. Otherwise, if it was something more inferior, then it would be extremely normal for the time to be tripled or even quintupled. Traveling underground, the chance of them encountering fellow travelers was naturally overwhelmingly low, and without encountering anyone, there naturally would not be any trouble. They successfully passed mountains and waters, heading all the way to the Universal Peace Heaven. Of course, they would also encounter some minor twists and turns, such as an earthquake or landslide, which would cause some trouble on the journey, but it was only small trouble. Slightly less than 7 months later, they had finally arrived in the Universal Peace Heaven. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.